welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And today, I'm posting up an episode back from our SNS archives, back in the first season of SNS. It's actually a show that I myself wasn't on, but we had a special Christian guest called CJ Morgan, who was on the show, and he interacted with David. So out of respect for CJ Morgan, as he was a guest when I was the co-host of the show, I felt I would post that up from the SNS archives for people, just to mix things up, give you a different Christian's perspective from an evangelical Christian pasture. And just before we get into that show, some RSM announcements, or Real Seekers announcements. So in the first place, a lot of the listeners will be happy, as well as a lot of my guests. I've received complaints on and off sometimes about the quality of my audio or videos and that sort of thing. It's something that I personally am just horrible. I don't understand. I'm kind of just, well, as long as you can hear the content, hear the substantive points that are being said, who cares whether it's, HD quality or whether it's, the audio is pristine or stuff like that. But I do recognize that I'm a weirdo when it comes to that, and that a lot of you guys, it does bug you. So I've taken a step to help you. I've bought a microphone so that will improve my podcast's audio quality, hopefully, going forward. Pay attention to that. I'll be using that when I have brand new shows. And speaking of brand new Real Seeker shows in the pipeline for October and November. So I have, starting in October, I have some very special guest shows lined up for you guys. So that'll be brand new Real Seeker content. So starting on October 2nd, I have a debate with the atheist YouTuber T-Jump, or Tom Jump, on the ontological argument. So it's going to be round 2 of us sort of having a discussion together. After that, I do have confirmation from the famous Muslim apologist and my friend Dr. Shabir Ali, who will be coming on sometime in early November. Right now it's at November 9th, so hopefully that'll stay in place. Debating the numerical patterns in the Quran. This is something that I'll be excited to talk about. It's, I think, the most powerful evidence for positive evidence in favor of Islam. So it's gonna be good to kind of figure out what is that all about. I also have agreements from for you Shroud fans, Shroud Wars debate with Dr. Gary Habermas versus Hugh Ferry, having a discussion together on the evidence for the Shroud of Turin. I wanted that specifically to be on the historical evidence, linking it to the historical Jesus. But it looks like both the guests want it to just be a little bit more general, so it'll cover that, but it'll be just sort of talking about the Shroud in general. So it'll be a generalized Shroud Wars debate, but that'll still be great to have Gary interact with you there. And I also possibly have some other guests lined up for October. Dr. Asha Lancaster Thomas wants to speak on the topic of pantheism, and possibly the Evil God Challenge as well. She's an expert in that. And I also am in talks with Jack Symes, who's got a great podcast of his own, much bigger than mine. He's got something like 35,000 followers and that sort of thing. I'm scheduled to talk to him in October as well. So I'll see if I can convince him if he wants to come on the podcast and do a show on a topic. So yeah, all of that is what's down the pipeline in the immediate future. So yeah, look out for that. Otherwise, I will stop talking and let's get into this old show from the first season of Skeptics and Seekers, where David is debating or having a discussion with my fellow Christian, CJ Morgan. All right, take care.
Hello, everybody. This is David. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. This recording is long. It's a very long recording. And it gets pretty intense in there. I want you to know, though, that I spent some time talking with CJ before the podcast, let him know what to expect, so he wasn't blindsided by any of it. And we spent hours talking. This podcast is 3 hours long, and we spent hours after that talking. And we had a really delightful conversation. We enjoyed each other's company. Of course, the delightful conversation really kind of started after the record button was off. So I just want you to know that it probably wasn't as bad as it sounds as far as heatedness goes. And we walked away friends. We'll talk again. And like I said, we really enjoyed our conversation. We talked about more about religion. We talked about life. We just talked about all kinds of things, and it was a lot of fun. And so with that in mind, don't try to take this all in one bite. This is a long podcast. Split it up in 2 or 3 tries, and hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome back to Skeptics and Seekers. This is a supplemental edition. I'm your host, David Johnson. I'm joined by a special guest today. So we don't have Dale with us. Today, on the other side of the mic, we have, what's your name?
CJ Morgan.
CJ Morgan. And where are you from?
I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba.
The curse of Canada strikes again. It seems like the vast majority of our special guests come from Canada. I don't know what I've done to deserve this. I am cursed with politeness. This is not what a polemicist wants. At any rate, I've been chatting with CJ for a little bit here, and he lives up to the Canadian curse of nice guy no matter how you treat him. Dang it. So, I guess I'm going to have to be a nicer guy today. And let me just tell you how I came to hear about CJ, and I'll let him tell you about himself. I was on Unbelievable myself at one time with Justin Brierley, and I listened to Unbelievable. I'm a part of the discussion boards on Unbelievable every week, and I was listening to a show, a few months ago, and in the comments section at the end of the show, Justin reads out a letter, and it's a guy named CJ Morgan, and he was interested in getting onto shows to have conversations with atheists about his faith. And Justin sent him my information. He contacted me, and a few weeks later, here we are. Tell us yourself and your ministry, CJ.
Well, I'm a 25-year-old Christian. I moved out to Winnipeg to start a church with a friend of mine. We have been here for about 2 years. We have a small church with people from all over the world, and we just minister from the Bible. And so we have a few side little personal ministries, outreaches that we do, and for me, I really enjoy apologetics, and so I read on that. And then I try to do something like this.
Well, great. So now you say you're 25. How long have you been a Christian?
Well, I started going to church when I was in grade 4. I would say that I started to believe long before I did the prayer, did any kind of formal prayer towards my faith. I did that when I was about 13 and was baptized around the same year. So that would make it about 12 years. And so, yeah, that's where I'd put it, about 12 years. I started taking it really seriously not until I was maybe 17, 18.
So your church is Calgary Chapel.
Calvary.
Calvary Chapel,
Yeah.
sorry. And that's got a kind of a Southern Baptist flavor. Would that be fair to say?
Like you said, it's non-denominational, but you could compare it to a Baptist church to some degree.
Now, has that been your church denomination / non-denomination all of your life, or have you switched to going there? How did you get involved with Calvary?
My best friend growing up, his dad was a pastor and was the head of Canada, it turned out, for Calvary Chapels, and is now the head for just, I believe, Western Canada. And yeah, so I've always been going to Calvary Chapel.
I see. And how did you get involved with the church you are at right now?
Well, with my friend, we came out here and planted. I was I started going to his church when he first planted in Vancouver. We did that for about 7 years, and I just started doing stuff.
That would have made you 18.
Yeah.
That's pretty young for planting churches, wouldn't you say?
Well, he was planting the church. I was just showing up on a Sunday, and then a little while later, I started leading worship, leading some Bible studies for youth group and stuff like that, and it was just then a young adults group, and then we came out here and planted together.
Okay, so that's cool. Your church, everything going well there? Feeling pretty stable? Is it growing? Do you think it's going to be around for the next 10 years? How's it going?
Yeah, it's been growing pretty steadily, and like I said to you before, there's been new people pretty much on a weekly basis. People are inviting, so that's always great. When there are times where no one in your congregation invites, and only like your website draws in people, but almost on a weekly basis, someone's brought a friend or someone from work or something like that.
Okay, well that's exciting. That's a little bit of an introduction. Now we've had some interesting guests on our show. We've had recently Gary Habermas and Mike Lacona. We had Randall Rouser early. I believe that we'll have a few more guests that people will have heard of, and we don't actually spend time talking about their credentials and things like that. And so this is actually a little bit new in that I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit. We don't usually do that, but since the audience does not know who you are, I just thought that I'd give you a little bit of a chance to tell them about yourself and your faith. Anything else you want to tell them by way of introduction?
Wow, no, not really. I don't have any huge educational background. I read a lot, but that would be about it. I just try to understand where other people get their ideas, including the opposite side of the aisle. I was 15 when I read The God Delusion, so I wanted to know what other people believed as well.
Sure. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and let's dive in. All right. So, in Skeptics and Seekers fashion, there is a blog attached to this, and you wrote an interesting blog post, and I've written a response to that. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that, but also in Skeptics and Seekers fashion, you should know, Dale and I tend to write long, rambling blog posts, and then we get on the mic, and then we never talk about it. We end up talking about things ancillary to that. So I'm going to try to honor the fact that we have written blog posts and try to talk about that and expand on that. But I don't want you to feel like you are limited to the words on the page.
Okay.
So it's kind of the beginning of the conversation. So like always, I encourage people to read the blog at skepticsandseekers.wordpress.com. Feel free to leave a comment underneath the blog. And do you have anything you want to plug before we get started? Your church's website? Do you have a blog? Anything that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, well, I guess it would be the best thing to be plugging is my church's website. It would be Radiant Church, and I believe .ca. And if you Googled Calvary Chapel Winnipeg, it would get you there. And just go there. You can listen to our sermons. You can send in prayer requests, and we do get them. And we do have a group every Wednesday that gathers and goes over those.
Okay, so presuming I don't forget about it, I will include the link in the blog so that people will be able to click on that and find you. So normally what we do is we let the person who wrote the initiating blog, in this case that would be you, get started and talk for maybe 5 or 10 minutes about the thing that they wrote, the position that they are defending and then the other person would respond to that, and then we'd have some back and forth exchange. So I know that I didn't prepare you with that up front, so you may not have a particular speech you want to make about your blog post, but I want to extend that to you. I'm prepared to reverse things a little bit if you like. So would you like to start off with a statement about your position, or would you rather me start off?
I'm comfortable starting.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, you're okay with me mostly addressing from, like, I made the point of the Bible is a wonderful book. I started with that, and you rebutted talking about the fact that immediately disagreement in it. The Bible you believed is a hideous book.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll get to my disagreement here. But what I want you to do is go ahead and make your case, make your best case, and I will give you the mic, and I will not interrupt.
Okay. Well, like I said, I quoted a man named Richard Warmbrand. This is from his book Tortured for Christ. It was written about 1940. Now, I believe this could be summarized a little bit easier by looking at it like this. I think we have this idea of understanding what truth is. I think it's easiest to look at it through I think if you are taking the Christian perspective, you can understand that it is founded in Christ. Now, there are true statements that are outside of that, but let's say Thomas has a bike. Now, that's true because you can see that he has it, but it's really Mike's bike, and so Thomas must have taken that bike. So those are both true statements, but then we get to understanding that is wrong, that he took his bike. Maybe he stole it. We have a true story, but why is it wrong? Well, there's a moral obligation in there, so that there is a moral truth. And why is there a moral truth? Because there is an objective truth giver, an objective moral giver. And so that is how we get to the truth in Christ. So there are true things outside of Christ, but as we expand, we get to a God that holds and sustains all things. So I believe that would be another way to look at this truth about the truth about the truth. It is I must state my case as that, and so I wanted to explain that a little bit better, or with maybe just a story, so that it would make a little bit more sense. Mm-hmm. Because. Anyways, I'm sorry. I was thinking I was going to be kind of taking what you'd said and kind of.
You can do that too if you like, but there will be a time where we go back and forth on this. I just want to make sure that you have space without me badgering you to make your case clear to the audience.
And okay. Well, and then so I put that as my basis of understanding for my case. I think one thing that I must have I will say I misworded or however you want to state it. It says if God is true, we should expect him to make true statements, true to life, true to history, and true to governing bodies. What it should be is that he should make statements that are true to life, be true to history, and be true to the governing mechanisms of the universe. So it's not just founded purely on the Bible. We should also be able to understand that that there is a God through the governing mechanisms of this universe, or as C.S. Lewis put it, I believe there are two books that God wrote, the book of the Word and the book of nature, or the book of the laws of nature, and true to history, because if it is claiming to be a book about things that happened, it should have happened, and we should be able to make a case for that. And so that would be what the three ideas that I kind of laid into. True to life, I made a case that God made statements. Now, I think that God laid out rules knowing how human nature worked and how his creation would go about. How he laid out things that would, like I made the case that he laid out a quarantine system nearly 3,000 years before the Black Plague. And during the Black Plague is when quarantine was invented, in tiny little Italian town. So it gave... he knew that this would keep people from spreading disease. And if people continued to follow his law, regardless of whether or not they believed, if they followed his law and as he stated them there, they would have been able to keep themselves from spreading disease. With I know that a lot of people criticize, well, why would God allow diseases and the spreading of that and things like that? Well, God made a system that would have helped in those cases, even though there are diseases and they can spread. He set up a charitable system. Now, this is they were supposed to leave the outside crops. They were supposed to leave a little bit of crop left out in the fields. That way people could travelers and the poor could go and collect food off the crops to survive, to make sure people would stay alive. And then the prescribed food, I think when you're traveling for 40 years between lands, he chose them to eat certain kinds of food. He made sure that they didn't eat meat that had been stayed for more than 3 days, or eat predators. I believe that it's because if you ate a predator, it could have eaten something that could get you sick. We get into true to history. Atheists, I lay the case out that Luke was a great historian, first rank. This is a quote from William Ramsey. First rank, not merely his statements are fact and of fact trustworthy. This author should be placed along with the very greatest historians. I make the case that the Gospels were written actually fairly early, after Christ's death, within 25 years, really, when there have been times where people believed at least the Gospel of John was written after 200 years after Christ had died. And then and lastly, I make the case that God is true to nature, to the governing laws of nature. That we have things like our DNA and biology at a chemical level, at a level of DNA is described as language and has patterns that are recognizable and that point towards a designer. Now, even Richard Dawkins said that biology is the study of something that looks like design, and then goes on to say but it is not. But if we have an inkling that there is a designer, just based on the fact that it has design imprinted on it, it has this idea that of a pattern, and then with physics we have the same kind, and mathematics. Einstein put it that the only unreasonable thing about the universe is how reasonable it is. So we have this we have this coming together of something, both in the basic structure of our life and the basic structure of our universe. They both come to the idea that it looks like it has a reasonable mind, and I quote Fred Hoyle as it looks like it. Common sense interpretation of the facts suggests super intellect has monkeyed with the physics as well as the chemistry and biology, and that there is no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. And then lastly, I lay out questions. Now, this is not a God of the Gaps reaching out. This is every worldview ought to answer these questions, whether you believe in God or not. We have to understand that that a belief system has to answer certain ideas. Sorry.
Yeah, dude, that's okay. You're doing fine.
There are three. Rabbi Zacharias put it as there are three tests for truth in any worldview: logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. And so I think those things need to be answered. So that's what that would be a brief summary of what I wrote out there.
So you did ask some questions though at the end.
Yeah.
Do you remember what those questions were? Do you have
those? I have those. So the questions there are: why is the universe adhered to simple, discoverable laws? Mm-hmm. Why is there a universe at all? Mm-hmm. Why is it that we have life? Why is it that we are such creatures that can discover truth? And what makes one person's rights equal to mine own? Where do we get a sense of morality?
Okay. And you think that these questions are necessary for all worldviews to answer?
Yeah. I think understanding where that we can't just say there is life brute fact. We don't need to know why. We have to understand there needs to be at least an understanding of how life came to start.
Okay, so I tell you what, before I make my positive case,
okay,
I want to just go back on some of the things that you mentioned. We can start at that in reverse here.
Okay.
So your necessary questions that you think that all worldviews must answer, I would challenge that at a slightly different level. I don't think anyone needs a worldview. So I would actually ask, why does anyone need a worldview at all, let alone answer those particular questions? Secondarily, what makes those questions the ones that need to be answered as opposed to others?
Well, I think we need a worldview for consistency. Well, at least people that want to be coherent and consistent in how they live out their lives.
People are coherent and consistent anyway. I mean, I think the average person,
but
they go to work, they go to school for, however long they go to college, they get a job, they get a family, they go to work every day, they watch football on the weekends, maybe have a little bit too much to drink on one of those days. They get indigestion, they get parents that are sick, they try to take care of their kids, and they worry about them. I don't think you need a quote-unquote worldview to do any of that stuff.
I would suggest that they have a worldview, or at least they're standing on the foundations of a worldview preset. They go to school and they do all these things because there's a worldview that created a structure that they could live now without creating or living by.
Okay, so there are definitely structures, social structures that emerge over thousands of years. We definitely have social structures, and different societies have different social structures, but that does not mean that an individual has a worldview. That is not the same thing. Everyone is not an ideologue and has some kind of written down code of answers to specific questions before they go to work every day. I don't accept the idea that we even need what you are calling a formalized worldview to live our lives successfully and happily.
I believe that when you are confronted with let's say a moral problem, or confronted with back-breaking issues in your life, I think that's when you are broken down to your worldview.
No, it isn't. I don't want to sound churlish, but no, that's not true. First of all, I've been there. I've been broken down to within an inch of my life, and I got to tell you, there wasn't any particular worldview I was leaning on at the time. If anything, it was a worldview that a former worldview that was probably coming apart a little bit because it didn't work. And during those times of crisis, you can often see if you have a worldview, whether it works or not. And for a lot of people, they find, this thing that I thought I believed, that doesn't work when it comes right down to it. I don't think that you need a worldview in a time of crisis. What you need is family and friends, and a stout heart, and a little bit of luck. And so once again, you are suggesting that someone needs to be an ideologue of some kind in order to get along in life. And I think that the vast majority of people are the counter argument to that. They are not ideologues.
Well, I would, like I said, I would assert that people live out a worldview whether or not they recognize it as
so
such.
So if you're just going to paste someone with a worldview, and you're just going to say you have a worldview whether you think so or not, I don't know that that's a particularly
well like that, like we said, there are societal ideas that are set in place. Now, most for North America, let's say, that is based on the Judeo-Christian worldview. Now, that is where the laws are founded, but that is not where the laws are right now.
Okay, well, I would strongly disagree with that too. That's I think that's a terrible misunderstanding of how America was founded. If anything, America was founded to get away from those kinds of religious ideas. It wasn't founded.
Why do you think that?
I've read a few books.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the statements of the founders, and so I don't know that I want to get into battle of library books, though.
Okay, but I believe in separation of church and state, but that doesn't mean that I believe that the separation of church and state is the separation of Christian values and law.
Sure, I'm sure that you don't believe that, but to say that America was founded on Christian values or Christianity is, I think, just a misreading of history and a misunderstanding of how this nation was founded. And I think that you're reading into something that you would like to be the case that simply isn't the case. So I understand it's a major talking point for Christians. I just don't find it to be true when I read history.
All right. Well, I would disagree based on the same reading of history at the very least.
Okay, but for the sake of argument, let's just say that it was founded on Christian ideas. I don't care.
Okay.
Why should I care what someone thought about Christianity 230 years ago or whatever? Why should I care? What does that have to do with me and how I live my life and what I believe?
Well, I look at it like this: when we tear away at the foundations that made us where we are, and then try to change even what I believe there's a great revisionism of history going on currently. one of the founders of Canada, his statue was taken away in Victoria because he had slaves. And though I don't think it was right that he had that, and or how he treated the Indigenous people, I don't think it's right to tear away history for those things.
Really,
I
you think
even,
that we should? You think that we should revere people who are not people that should be revered? I mean, honestly,
it's not about revering people.
Okay, well,
it's
what
about
it's
understanding history.
I don't think that anyone went to the library and burned books, but a statue is about revering.
Actually, there was a lobby within our government to destroy the documents of what had happened to the Indigenous people.
I would be against that, but a statue is not a book. A statue is revering. So I'm all for taking down statues and flags. So yeah, we can maintain history without having the signs of reverence and worship for that history.
Okay, well, but I still state
and by the way,
that,
this Christian foundation that you seem to be enamored with, that did bring us slavery.
I disagree entirely.
Oh, okay. So the Christians, I don't know much about Canada's history. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But I do know a bit about U.S. history. And the Christians were very much in favor of slavery. Now, I know that there were Christians also who fought against slavery, but they were fighting against each other.
Well, just because someone claims a worldview doesn't mean they hold to the worldview.
Oh, you're saying that no one who owned slaves were Christians?
No, I'm saying that people that own slaves did not adhere fully to the worldview that they're saying that they.
Kind of like Philemon.
Pardon?
Philemon. He was a famous Christian who owned slaves.
Okay, well, let's look at what biblical slavery is like compared to what we're talking about.
Wait a minute, but he was a Christian who owned slaves, right?
Philemon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're going to actually try to make the argument that was a good slavery?
I believe when we recognize that the fact that this book the Bible is also just reporting history.
Well, no, it's not just reporting history. You just
So
you just tried to make the case that somehow Christians weren't really Christians because they owned slaves, and I just named a guy.
Okay. So let's define because right now in the world that we live in now, there are more slaves than there have ever been in all of history.
Okay, and that's wrong.
And it's very wrong.
Okay,
and
it's always been wrong in history. Yes.
Yes, but we must define
Philemon
the
was
slavery
wrong.
that we're talking about. We must
was Philemon wrong or not when he owned slaves?
Philemon's slaves were different than the category we would put them under.
And
today.
what about the slaves?
So
what about the slaves back before Philemon in the Old Testament?
That's what I'll talk about. So Genesis. So the Jewish people leave Egypt. That's when they finally get their rules and laws. There's an entire chapter in Exodus, that is dedicated to the idea of slavery, and it gives slaves rights, it gives them freedoms, and it limits the term of their service.
Wait a minute. Does it not say that slaves can be owned for life?
No.
Really? Are you sure?
Okay. The person is allowed to give themselves over to a person for life.
No.
Yes.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I want to get a baseline for what you know or think you know on this subject, because you do not know what you think you know. And so I want to. I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't think you are familiar with slavery in the Bible. So let me just try to save you from that a little bit. Now we can go to these texts, but for the sake of brevity, because there are other things I want to get to, I'll just drop this in the show notes and in the blog so that people can go back and look up passages. But there is a very particular passage that talks about slaves that you take among your own people and slaves you take from outside of your people. Now, the Jewish slaves, they were not to be treated ruthlessly. They were to be treated more like employees. Their slavery was for a time and a season, and then they were to be released. However, in that same passage it says, but for the slaves that you take from the outside, those slaves are your property for life. And the laws of treating them ruthlessly do not apply to those people. And you can pass those slaves down to your children because they are your property. The Jews were not to be treated like property, but the slaves outside of the Jews were to be treated like property. Now, if you're not familiar with that, you need to understand that this is a fairly direct reading of the slavery codes in the Old Testament.
Well, I'm looking at the text right here, not specifically what your text says, not what you're referring to, but I'm looking at Exodus 21:16, which says, "Whoever steals a man and sells him, or if anyone is found in possession of him, he shall be put to death." So if you steal a person, which is exactly how we would describe the slavery that happened in the United States and happened in England. You're talking about stealing someone from their land, tearing them from their home, and keeping them as your possession. This is not something like I agree that what you're talking about people keeping the possession of a person. Keeping them from outside the Jewish people, that was a part of the rule, a part of the law. This would be in the case of people being taken over in war, and the civilians being left there. That would be taken as a piece, at that time, property. I believe if God had said, I believe what
I'm sorry. I just want to I want to save you a little bit from this. Leviticus chapter 25. I'm going to do a little bit of reading, and maybe this will change your mind, because what you are is the victim of cherry picking, and someone has given you some passages that helps you live with the idea of slavery in the Bible, and so maybe you have one passage or two passages that say one thing, but
that's the Ten Commandments.
You're not looking at the full body of the text. So once again, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to expand what your understanding of the text itself. Leviticus 25. You can follow along if you like. Mm-hmm. And starting at about 39. Now, everyone knows that I hate reading out loud because I can't see well, but I will do this anyway as a service to you and the listener. If a fellow Israelite becomes poor and sells himself to you, you must not treat him as an ordinary slave, but rather as a hired servant or as a guest. And he shall serve you only until the year of Jubilee. And that time he can leave with his children and return to his own family and possessions. For I have brought you from the land of Egypt, and you are my servants. So you may not be sold as ordinary slaves or treated harshly. Fear your God. But then it follows. However, you may purchase slaves from the foreign nations living around you, and you may purchase the children of the foreigners living among you, even though they have been born in your land. They will be permanent slaves for you to pass on to your children after you. But your brothers, the people of Israel, shall not be treated so. The word of the Lord. Any questions?
Sorry, I'm just reading on.
You can read the whole Bible. It's not gonna fix that. I promise. So, is this a passage you're familiar with,
I've read Leviticus, but it wasn't the one I like. Like I said, it was, well, I
Okay, so this
wasn't one
idea
that I
might
was
be
thinking about.
maybe this idea is new to you and you want to digest it for a little bit.
Well, here's what I'll say.
You do see this as in
Dennis-
direct contrast, in direct contradiction to what you were saying earlier. This is why I was trying to stop you, because you didn't seem to know about this passage.
I like I said, I look at it through the perspective of the Ten Commandments expounded upon, talking about slavery. Says, "Do not steal a man or purchase a person stolen."
Okay, I understand that, but I just read you a text
Yes.
from Leviticus, a long text that's very clear. It's a very clear text, and I read it from a very clear translation. I'm not trying to trip you up with, it says what I said it says.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I agree.
Okay,
And
so this is not
I
a different
agree that
kind of slavery where from the kind of slavery we had in America. I know that a lot of people like to make some kind of a difference between chattel slavery, what they call it, and the slavery of the Bible, but all chattel slavery means, this is just people who don't understand words, all chattel slavery means is property. That's chattel. And this passage is a manifesto for chattel slavery. That is a way of making other people your property for life. Now, would you like me to read more passages where it says that you can beat your slave to within an inch of their life, or has the point been made?
When it talks about the fact that if you hit someone in the face, they could go free, and they lose an eye or lose a tooth, they go free.
Well, no, that's if you damage them in that way. But assuming that you don't, and trust me, I was an athlete. I know how to beat you. Without injuring you, right?
So if you beat someone and they do die, you die.
I know how to beat you without dying, without killing you. That doesn't really make it better.
Well, just because you can, who's deciding that I know that they can beat someone to the inch of their life, but they know that they're gonna keep it on the life side.
Well, the Bible says it's okay to beat them as long as they are not damaged and as long as they don't die. I don't see how that's different from whipping someone with a cat of nine tails. They didn't lose an eye. They can still go on working. They didn't die. The Bible makes it clear that you can beat your slave. The Bible doesn't say you can't beat your slave. In fact, the reason it says you can beat your slave is very specifically because they are your property. Now, tell me again how this is a better form of slavery.
Like I said, I believe that when someone was stolen from their land, or stolen, or if they were bought from someone that stole it. So I believe that the only people that had given themselves over to be basically what we would consider a contracted person that would live in the household to serve that person.
So when God told his people to take slaves of people from wars and things like that, that's not stealing people from their land?
When you okay, so let's say
help me understand that.
Let's say you leave a pillaged land like that. You leave the people in that pillaged land. They were described to have to take care of those people. They were described what they were. If it was, they decided they wanted to marry someone, in that they had to leave them time to mourn the loss before.
Let's please not defend rape wives in war. I don't. You don't believe that. I know you're 25 right now, but you don't believe that. If in the Gulf War, our soldiers had behaved like the particular passage we're talking around right now, it would be war crimes and they would be put to death, justifiably so. You don't believe for a moment that those passages represent good and just behavior. I won't let you say it. You won't be able to live with yourself when you're 40.
I don't believe that it's telling them to do it. I'm saying,
in fact, it told them to do it.
I'm saying it's telling them to, at the very most, limit the behavior that they would have done anyways.
So
I
I don't think I understand how that's better. So you're a bunch of brutish barbarians. So be slightly less brutish and barbaric. Is that what you're saying? That's the mercy of God. What you were saying just a moment ago. What you're saying just a moment ago. I want to be clear. Is that they didn't take slaves from their land, and so that's somehow the difference. So they did take people from their land and make them slaves, and they did make them property for life. And I am still trying to figure out how you think this slavery that is mandated in the Bible, throughout the Bible, including the New Testament, is somehow better than the slavery of the U.S. Why is Philemon not a bad guy?
Which nation in 2,000 years before Christ, 1,000 years before Christ did not have slavery?
I don't know.
Not a single one.
I don't care.
Not a single one.
But no, you know what I'm saying? I don't care because God made His own nation. God artificially created a nation, and He could have made it with whatever moral codes He wanted to. For instance, He was able to tell them not to make clothes with mixed fabrics. Now, that was so important to God that they don't wear clothes from mixed fabrics. He made sure to tell them that. He made sure to tell them, don't eat shellfish. He cared about their diet, but he couldn't bring himself to say, oh, and by the way, don't own other people like those other nations.
I would say that's exactly what he said when he made the rules of law around slavery.
Oh, okay. Well, then
don't own
case,
people like those other nations.
Okay, so
I think if they didn't have a
children
system.
of foreigners living among you, even though they are born in your land, they will be your permanent slaves. That you can pass on to your children. This sounds like owning people.
Like I said, like those other nations.
Well, how did they own them different?
They had rights of liberty.
Huh?
They had rights to freedom.
They also had the right to get beaten badly, right? I mean, they had. I don't understand what you're saying. I come from a part of the country where slave houses still stand.
Mm-hmm.
You can go see them. And those people who owned those slaves defended their ownership and treatment of their slaves based on these passages in the Bible that we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
They did not see the slavery different from the Bible. I do not see the slavery different from the Bible. And every time you try to point out an area where you think the slavery is different, you have made it clear that you have not read the Bible on slavery, because the Bible disagrees with you. People were taken from their lands. People were beaten, sometimes harshly, as long as they didn't die or lose an eye or something like that. People were owned and passed on to their children. Daughters were sold into slavery. This is a bad system, and there's no way you would want to take this system that God set up for slavery and live under it.
Recognize that I believe God, that God set this knowing through a future time that he would set in place abolishment through the idea that all people were under Christ.
Well, God didn't abolish slavery under Christ, because the first question I asked you was about a slave owner.
Philemon.
That's right.
No, I get that. It's not like he just stopped and changed the rules of the law of the land.
Then he didn't do it. How are you giving him the credit? When did he say stop owning slaves? The Bible never says it. You know how we stopped owning slaves? War. That wasn't a holy war. God didn't lead that war. God had a chance to lead that war. He didn't do it.
That's how you guys did it. But how the slave trade ended was William Wilberforce.
Okay, but God didn't end it.
William Wilberforce went about to abolish the slave trade because he believed that all people were equal under the eyes of God.
God didn't believe that, though. God did not abolish slavery. You're missing my point. God had a chance to not just abolish slavery, he had a chance to not institute it. He instituted it. He didn't abolish it in the Gospels. He carried it on. He didn't abolish it in the epistles. He carried it on. Slaves, obey your masters, even as you would obey Christ. I think that is one of the most obscene passages in the Bible.
Well,
no one should ever obey their master if they're a slave. You know what they should do? They should escape.
Okay, then why do you not escape from the American government? You don't own the piece of. I don't own. Well, in Canada, I don't own the land that I bought. I don't own it. I pay a price to.
If you're trying to conflate your life with slavery of the Bible, you have lost touch with reality.
I would conflate the idea that servanthood and mastership has not ended.
Well, once again, it sounds like you're trying to make a false equivalent between employment and living in a free state and slavery. I will not let you do that. That's obscene, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to listen to this podcast and hear yourself saying that. I'm pretty sure that is not a thing that you mean to say. Look, there's some things that we actually did talk about though in the blogs. Funnily, we didn't talk about this. Not a subject that I expected to come up, but I'm disappointed that it did because I'm disappointed every time I hear a Christian defending slavery. It sickens me.
I said,
sickens me.
I think Christianity is the reason why slavery is gone.
No, Christianity is not the reason why slavery is gone. If Christianity wanted to end slavery, Christianity could have ended slavery. Let's say during the Christian era of the Bible, didn't do any such thing. But let's go on to some.
But wait. Okay. If Christianity was to end it in let's say they tried to end it in the Christian era of the Bible. So you have what maybe 2,000 let's say 5,000 people. Jewish people that became Christian in that first instant, counting Pentecost and before when Jesus was around. Now they rebel against the Roman occupation?
They didn't have to do that. That's not actually. I'm not sure why your mind goes there.
Christian. How did they were subject to?
Yeah, but they were subject. But guess what? Jesus could have said, by the way, Christians don't own slaves. I understand that sometimes people will own you, but don't own slaves like those other people. Just like God before could have said, by the way, don't own slaves.
I think God
simple.
recognized
it's done.
that
One passage in the Gospels.
People would not have done it.
Never mind people. We're talking about Christians. I don't care. I don't care about the rest of the Roman Empire. Just the people who are beholden to Jesus. Those people could have not owned slaves.
Like I said, I believe that when you get to the New Testament and he's talking about slaves still, it is saying to treat them better than any nation has done before.
No, I don't want a group treating slaves well. I want a group not owning slaves.
I think if he told people not to own slaves,
if he told his followers, don't just say people. If he told his followers his
followers not to have any slaves at that time, it would have changed nothing because no one would have followed it.
Okay, then I would say that there are no Christians then. If you're saying that nobody would have followed his laws, and he was too scared to give it because nobody would have followed it, or he was too weak to give it because no one would have followed it, then he's not worth following.
I think he set in motion the.
He didn't set anything in motion. He came, lived, died, and went back without saying boo about slavery. That's not setting it in motion. I'm sorry. So I mean, you know, let's take a look at some of the things that we wrote here, because I think that
Yeah.
there are some things in the blog that need to be addressed.
Okay.
You mentioned 3 areas where you think the Bible speaks truth, and you mentioned these things as if that means the Bible is true
like
somehow.
uh, like I said when I was opening up there, that I think when I stated it as we should expect him to make true statements, I meant he would make statements that are true to life, that the statements would
Okay, but
be
let me
true
just
in
stop you there.
history and
I make
be
statements that are true to life, true to history, and true about the universe. So what?
my so I was saying that the Bible be true in history, not
Okay, but
because of
it
course
doesn't.
you're right that if you can make anyone can make statements that are true to life, are true to history, and be true within governing bodies of the but with if those things are not true to the Bible, if the Bible does not hold to that, then it would not be true.
It doesn't matter that the Bible says true things about life, history, and the universe. What point does that prove? It doesn't mean that everything the Bible says is true. So I gave an example. I gave a couple of examples. One is kind of a silly example, just because I say many true things about life, history, and physics. That would not mean that I was telling the truth if I told you about universe creating pixies. That would be a lie. And no amount of truth I have told before that would change that fact.
But
I mentioned
would it
go ahead.
would it would it would let's say you made a statement that stood outside the regular mechanisms of the universe. So let's say you said that there were universe creating pixies, and then we saw those universe creating pixies at work. Then we could have a good reason to believe that a singularity like that could happen.
Sure, but
Well, or maybe
my point is you can't take any truth that I tell you and extrapolate some other thing is true that I said just because I told the truth about some other things. You seem to be wanting to do that about the Bible. You
well,
seem
I
to
would
be
say
saying
when you have stuff like I would say the Old Testament holds to prophecy. The New Testament has prophecy and historical Jesus. Those would be statements that would have to be true in history to be founded for anything to be founded on it. And if you make a statement and it holds like someone being raised from the dead, and it holds true to history, that is something that would be outside the regular governing bodies of what we would expect. And then it happens, and this is reporting on it. You have a certain level of understanding that the other claims that are outside the regular understanding should be true as well.
no. So even if I rose from the dead and came back and said some things, it doesn't mean that the things that I come back and say are true.
Why not?
What?
Well, let's say so. Let's say you say that previous to you rising from the dead, 3 days before you say or you say that I'm going to die, and 3 days later I'm going to rise from the dead. And when you rose from the dead, why would you not be able to make true statements?
I didn't
Or
say
why
I
would this?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't be able to, but I'd also be able to make false statements.
But the idea is based on this is someone that is making claims about heaven.
Right.
What
Which
rose?
I see no reason to believe.
What rose you from the dead
Let-
in your mentality? If
well,
is it God?
in this example, I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Okay, well, in the example of the Bible,
Let's say
it
the
was
devil
God.
rose me from the dead because he liked the work I was doing.
Okay.
I don't. Whatever. I rose from the dead. It doesn't mean that I'm telling you the truth about the afterlife. Why should
I
you
don't
believe?
think the devil can raise someone from the dead.
Okay, but why should you believe anything that the Bible, for instance, would say about the afterlife?
Just because someone rose from the dead? Is that what you're really saying?
Yeah. Well, actually, the Bible has lots of stories about people rising from the dead that even I think a lot of Christians don't believe is literal.
Lazarus. Well, when someone claims that they're the son of God, gets killed for it, pre-claims that they're going to rise from the dead, rise from the dead as well, and then continue to make those claims. It holds a different gravity than someone just making truth statements.
You can't prove to me that Jesus rose from the dead. I mean, that's also a story in the book.
Well, I think you just had Gary Habermas on. He makes a pretty compelling case through his minimal facts arguments.
Yeah, we didn't talk about his minimal facts.
I know you guys didn't, but
I do know his minimal facts argument. Maybe he'll come back on the show and talk about it. But I'm not impressed with his minimal facts argument. I think they're so minimal that people at the time didn't believe it. Jews didn't exactly jump on the Christian bandwagon, and they were closest to the time.
But Jews also did, and they had no reason to. They were the chosen people of God.
Well, okay, so you're making just some claims. They had
no.
But
that's what the idea that they were the chosen people of God is the beliefs that the Jewish people had. They are the chosen people of God. That was what Jewish people believed. It's what Orthodox Jewish people believe to this day, that they are the chosen people of God.
Right.
So what reason would they have to follow a guy that died on a cross?
Apparently very little.
Well, I think they did. Thousands of them did. Enough to eventually topple the Roman nation.
Well, most Jews today are non-believers. They're atheists. And Jews in Jerusalem, I read this fairly recently, only about 25% of the Jews in Jerusalem are atheists, and about half are weak believers, but certainly not Orthodox practicing. Even among the Jews, not only are they not Christians, they don't even believe in God.
Well, that would be a conflation of. See, Christianity wasn't a name for anything at that time because we hadn't given it that name. Now, you brought up that Jewish people should, I think should sue for the fact that Christians use the Old Testament.
that Christians have tried to appropriate the Old Testament as their own.
Well, I think the Christianity is based on the messianic claim of the Old Testament. All we're saying is that happened.
You realize that most Jews don't
fulfillment.
recognize those messianic claims that you're talking about. Most Jews don't recognize those as talking about Jesus.
Yes, I would agree, but I would agree that most Orthodox Jews, otherwise, if they did believe, then they would either be categorized as Messianic Jews or they'd be categorized as Christians. That's because we use these words to put them into categories.
Right. So we're talking about a very small percentage of the Jews, the people that Jesus supposedly came to save, actually believed.
Yeah, and it actually we have good reason to believe that there will be Jewish people all the way till he comes again. That believe in the temple. I believe the temple is going to be built within my lifetime, even, and because they have every emblem to do it. That was prophesied in Revelation, so 90 AD.
So why isn't Jerusalem the most Christian city in the world?
Well, I think the chosen people of God chose not to follow his.
They chose badly.
Yeah, but it was described that they would do that, and it is described that a new branch was grafted in, the olive branch being grafted in of the Gentile people. There was a time of the Gentiles, and that's going to come to an end.
Okay, so you mentioned the Jews in your in your first portion of God being true to life. I wanted to just say on the air, I think that the idea of a God choosing the Jews as a chosen people, God choosing Abraham and making a great nation out of him, his own nation, I think that is one of the great atrocities in the world. I think it is the beginning of some of the worst atrocities that has ever happened. This idea that God chose a special people and gave them a land that wasn't theirs. This is the beginning of some of the worst things that we can think of, and I cannot imagine
like worse than what was happening in Canaan.
I cannot imagine how this is the plan and will of a good God. First of all, why on earth would God need to choose a special people out of the earth? If all the world is his, why not give his message equally to everyone? Why is he choosing his own little nation?
I think he chose a person that was willing to listen. I think we are, because God gave us free will, I think
okay,
God...
So you think that, well, he chose Abraham, I get that, but he could have chose all persons equally who were willing to listen.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't have to choose Abraham and make a nation out of him.
Mm-hmm. You're right. He could have chosen someone different.
No, you don't understand. I'm not saying he could have chosen someone different. I'm saying he could have chosen everyone who listened to him.
Well, I think the only reason why I think he did choose everyone that was willing to listen through him. Job was not a part of the Jewish lineage.
Okay, so at the time of Abraham, there was only one person willing to listen to God?
Well, no, I think we just don't get written about. It doesn't get written about because of the fact that I believe Abraham was the only reason why God picked this nation. It was for the lineage of Christ, for the lineage of his Messiah.
Okay. Well,
so he made that.
That doesn't make any sense. Christ doesn't need a specific lineage. He could have.
No, but he picked this person. This person was willing to listen.
Okay, but there would have probably been a lot of people willing to listen. So I don't understand why we needed.
And a lot of people had nations made out of their lineage. But I'm saying that this is the one.
Why did God need his own special nation?
People set apart.
Why?
Why?
Yes. See, the thing is, when you have a chosen, then you've got unchosen. It's like taking one of your children. Do you have kids? I didn't ask you. Okay, so you have two kids. It's like choosing one of your kids and saying, I'm going to make you my special kid. That's bad parenting. Don't do it. Let me help you with that. I'm pretty sure you don't need me to tell you that.
But I had a neighbor of mine that told me that she said, we don't have favorites, except we do. It's our first. But
I hate
that's not the
second.
case for right. Or third. I think they have four now. So, but regardless, I think. Well, for one thing, through most of human history, everything went to the oldest son. So regardless of situation, there was a generational, you hand this to your oldest son.
Okay, still not impressed. That doesn't tell me why God needed to make a nation. He could have given his law equally to all people. He could have chosen some special representatives from every nation and, made them priests for their nation or what have you. But he didn't have to choose one nation and say, you over all of the rest. Now let's have war.
I don't think he said, now let's have war. But
oh, well, okay. What do you call the taking over of a land that wasn't theirs?
So when you're talking about in Genesis 15,
Well,
when Abraham took out the five kings that just beat Sodom, Gomorrah, and them, and Abraham had an army of 308 men or 16 men, and destroyed the army that just beat a bunch of other kingdoms, took back all the possessions, could have easily taken over the land of the Canaanites, and then God said to him, "Do not take the land, for their iniquity is not yet complete. Their iniquity, your nation will go under 400 years of slavery, and then their iniquity will be complete."
Yeah, so none of that makes any sense when you say it out loud, and you're trying to make a sensible case for why this is necessary.
What I'm saying is, God was saying that Abraham recognized that the Canaanites were not a righteous people. He had an army that could have taken out those people. But God told them that
I don't actually care about the timing.
Yeah,
I don't care about the timing, because he still ultimately did it. The whole land of Canaan, the whole promised land, was a land that God promised to his people that belonged to someone else.
Yeah, and he didn't give them
That's
the land
evil.
until the people there were sacrificing children on the altar of Moloch. Do you know what that altar was like?
I'm actually not impressed about your indignation of child sacrifice, because God accepted human sacrifice.
He did not.
He did accept
When?
human sacrifice. There was.
I know you pointed out that I think it was Abraham you were bringing up as part of your.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Then you're talking about when Joseph? No. When he comes back from after saying whatever comes
that
out.
Guy.
The reason why she mourns for her virginity is because she's now going to work as a servant.
Yeah, that's not actually how that reads. So I understand that that's how Christians like to soften that blow, but that's not actually how that reads. The man, his name will come to mind in a moment, but we're talking about the same guy, so I'm not going to overly worry about it. Promise to sacrifice anything that came out of his house. First, God said, okay, knowing full well what was going to come out of his house. His daughter said, okay, look, I get it. You made a promise, it's got to happen. Just let me mourn a little bit before this thing goes down. That's the story, and you can retell the story in a way that makes you sleep at night. But that's the story. And as far as
have you talked to Orthodox Jews about this story?
I have talked to Orthodox Jews about this and many other stories.
And what do they believe?
It depends on the Jews. There's no. It depends on the Jews and the Midrash and their particular bent. So I don't know that we can get a single understanding of this story. It really depends on what the person is reading into it. For me, I have always understood that story to be what it seems to be saying, and this is as a Christian, not as an atheist. That's just what the story said. It's a little like people trying to rewrite the story of how God tells Abraham to sacrifice his child. Now, if child sacrifice is so hideous, here is a God that's telling a guy who is familiar with child sacrifice to go sacrifice your kid. And he's not telling him, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, it's really not going to happen. As far as Abraham is concerned, he's going to kill his kid. What God just told him to do is kill his kid. I don't actually care what happens after that. God tells Abraham to kill your kid in my name. Abraham says, okay, and is prepared to do it. That is obscene before you move on to the rest of the story. It's already obscene at that point. And on the subject of child sacrifice, there are a few passages in the Old Testament where soldiers are commanded to rip children out of the wombs of the mothers. and they had to do it as a form of obedience to God. Now, you may not call it a child sacrifice, but this is not a God that's shy about killing kids. When you look at the Egyptians, the 10th plague, the whole idea of this plague was we're going to kill the firstborn children. It doesn't matter whether they were 50 or 5 months old. Mm-hmm. They're going to die. This is not a God who shies away from killing kids. So I'm not entirely sure where your indignation comes from with, the gods of Molech and so forth. How about the God of Abraham? He was an awful God, and he killed as many kids as anyone.
With one, I would say God recognized that Molech was just an idol made by man. So when people were sacrificing,
wait. Are you saying that when they killed children for the right God, that it was okay?
I think God doesn't look at our bodily death as anything but us.
Okay, so all you're doing is now you're justifying child sacrifice, just like
no, I don't think that he ever required child sacrifice.
Wrong.
No, God,
okay, well, you may not call it sacrifice.
Abraham was supposed to. He asked Abraham to be willing to sacrifice Isaac on the altar.
Right.
Isaac
he demanded a child sacrifice.
Isaac was the promised child that God delivered to Abraham.
Abraham didn't know that. God could have raised up another child. God could have raised up Isaac. It doesn't matter. God still told him to kill him.
Abraham recognized that this was a miracle already, that having that son at that age and everything else.
I don't care if it was a miracle. I don't care if that was a miracle. I'm saying it is obscene to tell someone to kill their kid.
And that God had been faithful through to this point.
Doesn't matter how faithful he's been through to that point. He told him
that he would be faithful.
He tested him by telling him to kill his kid.
Yes,
that's wrong. Period.
And then
full stop.
Then Abraham was expecting that either God would raise him back, or that God.
How is raising him back better? He still would have murdered his kid. I don't care how you finish that story. It is obscene at the beginning. You can't justify it by saying, well, he would have raised him up after that. You still have a murder on your hands. And more to the point, you have a command to murder on your hands. And Abraham was chosen because he was willing to say, okay, I'll kill my kid without question. That should have disqualified him. What Abraham should have said is, no, Lord, kill me instead, because I will never raise a hand against my kid. That's what he should have said.
Like I said, I think Abraham knew full well that through the promise of God that this child was to be the lineage to the nation.
Okay, well, let's test that theory. Let's see if you really believe that. You've got 2 kids. I don't even have to guess whether you love your kids.
I've never been promised
I believe
that
you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just follow me. Just follow me. This is what I call the Abraham test, because I want to see how much you really believe what you're saying right now. If God told you to kill your kid, and I am not talking about, well, you think it's God, you're not sure it's God. Let's pass by all that. It is God. It's God. We don't have any question about that. I know it. You know it. Everybody knows it. We all admit God told you to kill your kid, just like he did Abraham. Do you kill your kid, or do you tell God, no, I will not?
Sorry, I'm just thinking.
I understand. Look, this may seem like an unfair test. I gave myself the Abraham test first when I was a Christian. And I can tell you, when I was very young, under 15, I would have said from the pulpit, which I did many times in many pulpits, that I would do such a thing. But after about 20, when I was maybe childbearing age, I recognized, you know what? There's no chance on earth that I would ever kill my child. I would tell this God, look, God, I'm sorry. You're going to find someone else, or you're going to have to kill me now. I would never do it. I recognize that I would never do that. I recognize that the order to kill my child is immoral, and I simply wouldn't do it. And so I had to go through this, and this was one of the things that started me out of faith. And I am trying to get you to face this reality too.
No, I recognize it, and let's put it this way. I also I started being confronted by that idea actually first when I was hearing when ISIS first came about here about I don't know how long they've been around at this point, but that Christian families, what was happening is ISIS was coming into their homes, and they weren't putting the gun to the parents' head and saying, "You recant or you will die." They were putting the gun to their children's head and said, "Recant or they will die." And that's where I was confronted with it. And it was, do I love? Is that a will? Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to say, no, I will not reject Jesus?
Well, I think that is another interesting question to be sure, but that question
is different. It is different. No, I recognize that is different, and so I don't know what I would say in the situation of God specifically asking me.
If you don't know what you would say, then you are entertaining the possibility that you wouldn't do it.
And I would say that 1 Corinthians 13 says that you will not be tested beyond what you can bear. That God is faithful, and with temptation, He will provide a way out.
What makes you think that's a test beyond what you can bear? He gave the test to Abraham.
He gave that doesn't mean I have the same will as Abraham.
Well, but I'm saying that Abraham made the wrong decision. The fact that he gave that test to anyone is wrong. So I'm asking you. You are telling me that this God is a just God, and that this is a God that's true to life. And if that is true, then this is a true to life question that you have to be prepared to follow God wherever He leaves and does whatever He says. I believe if that's the typical conservative line. And I got to tell you, I've listened to many sermons where my father stood in the pulpit and said if God told him to kill one of his kids, he would do it. I'm sitting there. I'm right here.
Mm-hmm.
You would what? Try it, old man. So that is in fact an immoral idea.
Asked what they were doing, and Isaac asked where the sacrifice it was, and then Abraham said, "God will provide Himself the sacrifice." And 2,000 years later, God literally provided Himself as the sacrifice.
Okay, that's nice poetry, but that doesn't get you out of the Abraham problem.
I know it doesn't get me out of the Abraham problem. Okay. I told you I don't know what I would do specifically in that situation. I really don't. I'd like.
Okay, then stop selling it as if people should worship this as if it's good news, as if it's a good book. Because if you don't know what you would do.
No, just because I don't think that I could make that as a decision does not mean that God.
Well, but you're telling other people that they should follow God wherever He leads and do whatever He says.
I think the real point of God doing that was to test Abraham to say that, do you believe in the miracle more than you believe in me? So He promised him a son. Do you worship the promise more than you worship me? Now, God didn't promise me a son.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what God promised you or not promised you.
It is important.
No, it's not. What's important is God told you to do something. That's the only thing that's ever been important.
Okay,
the only question that you ever have to answer is, do you obey Him or not?
I think I would say I would obey Him. Not specifically in that, but because again, that one, I don't think I would be tested like that, specifically like that.
So you think that it was fair when Jesus told a rich man, "Tell you what, I know you're good in everything that I would want to, but how about this? Give away all your money."
Yeah.
You think that's fair?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're setting a double standard.
No. I think God did not set these these examples that you're talking about up to be spread out. Everyone has to do this. God knit a
Okay, well, you
specific
can say that they're
individual.
arbitrary. I don't. It's fine.
I'm not saying
they're
they're
arbitrary.
arbitrary. I'm saying that they're important, but we must understand that they're all individuals.
Okay, but I'm saying it's immoral no matter whether it's an individual or everybody. It was wrong to do it to Abraham. It was wrong to do it to the rich man. These types of immoral challenges are wrong, and they should not be done. In the same way that you're struggling to figure out whether you should do it or not, everyone else would be struggling too.
Yeah. I don't think God said that following me is like it's going to be sunshine and rainbows all the way through.
Yeah, he also didn't say it's following a moral monster. And if your God is telling you to kill your kid, you're following a moral monster. If he doesn't tell you but tells your neighbor to kill his kid, you're following a moral monster. It doesn't matter that it was your neighbor and not you. So look, time is moving on.
Yeah.
Couple of more points. You mentioned the universe. Let's go to the universe next. Saying true things about the universe. So in my counter case, I mentioned young Earth creationism. I believe that the Bible is proposing a young Earth creationism. And a lot of liberal Christians these days are saying, no, the Bible is supporting an old Earth creationism. So first of all, where are you there? Do you agree with me that the Bible is promoting a young Earth, or do you believe with other thinking Christians that it's an old Earth?
I believe it's a young Earth, and I would say that I would say that it is probably one of the beliefs that I hold that is purely. Well, not purely, but I believe it is one of the more beliefs that I rest in faith more than anything.
Okay. I was going to actually ask you about that, and I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad to hear you be very honest and straightforward about that, because most young Earth Christians I know would not say what you just said. So let me just ask the question that I was thinking. Let me make sure that your answer still matches up with it when I ask it. Are you if science came up with more evidence for old Earth, would you then believe the science, or would you trust in what the Bible is saying about the Earth?
Well, one, I don't think actually that's where the science is trending. I think it actually is trending the other way. But
pretend with me. Let's say that science does happen. It's a fairly straightforward question. Would you deny the science and obey what you think God is saying, or would you abandon your belief in what the Bible is saying and follow the science? So while you're thinking about this, okay, go ahead.
I would say currently, currently where I stand, I would follow my belief.
Okay. So I was where you are right now. I told you before the show, I believe most of the things that you believe now. I may have believed them even stronger than you at some point. I was a young Earth creationist. And I still believe that when I read the Bible, it is promoting a young Earth worldview. And in fact, I would say that most of the Bible just doesn't make sense in an old worldview. You can't get the sense you get out of the Bible, some of the statements of Jesus and Paul, for instance, on the view of an old Earth. So I would say that they also understood Adam and Eve as literal people, Garden of Eden, whole 9 yards. And so I also believed that. And I believed when I was younger that I didn't care what science said. Scientists were fools.
I don't think they're fools.
Well, I'm giving you a little bit of insight into me.
Okay.
Scientists were fools. They were fools. And here's why they were fools. They were fools because God already told us the answer. And if they are looking for a different answer, or their searching gives them a different answer, they have to be fools. Let God be true and every man a lie. That's what I believed. until I grew up a little bit more, and I read a few more books, and I ran into what you would call cognitive dissonance. I was understanding what the science was saying, and I understood very clearly that it was in conflict with what the Bible was saying. And I had to make a hard decision to deny the science or deny the Bible. I denied the Bible at the end of the day.
Well, like I said, I honestly think that the science is actually trending towards, a beginning to the universe. That there was thousands of years that there was no. It was always, the universe is eternal. Of course, it's eternal. It's always been. Only the the monotheistic worldview held that there was a beginning. And then, let's put it this way: we have other things. There's lots of things that have been placed in the Bible that point towards a science that is that didn't make sense at the time, or but does now, and things like that. Like for instance, when there's the abomination that causes desolation, he's in the synagogue, in the synagogue, and says, "I am God." So the Antichrist is in the temple of Jerusalem that doesn't exist right now, and is saying, "I am God," and that everyone's supposed to run. How is everyone supposed to know that happened? People in the fields are supposed to just drop what they're doing, going. People on the rooftops are just supposed to run away. This is in Jerusalem. When the two prophets that are supposed to be speaking to the people, they are in that same Old Testament, Revelation time, that end times prophecy. These two prophets die, and everyone can see them around the world and celebrates for 3 days. No one knew how that news could even leave Jerusalem within a day. Like, it would. How is it supposed to get across the entire world in 3 days? But now, and in the 1800s, Christians were mocked for this belief. Now we live in a world where this belief makes sense. That of course people could see what was happening in Israel in a day.
I lost the thread.
The idea is that there are sciences that have pointed, or there are things in the Bible that are claims that
I don't see how that shows that the
that have been
Earth is young.
ridiculed.
Right. Well, we ridicule the things that we can prove wrong. Right. I mean,
we could prove wrong that the idea that in the 1800s we could prove wrong that the news could travel around the world in 3 days. We could prove that wrong. We could prove the fact that there was no Israel for this person to stand in. We could prove that wrong up until 70 years ago.
I don't want to get far afield here. What you're saying is because you think the Bible is right about some things that people thought it was wrong about, therefore it's reasonable to believe that the Earth is about 6,000 years old. Is that what I'm getting? Is that your point?
I think, to a degree, yes. It is reasonable to believe that the Bible has been ridiculed for the claims that it's made, because science has pointed in other places, and as we discover more, we start to understand that it's closer to accurate, or it is accurate. I'm not
going to argue with you about the age of the Earth and the universe. So I'm going to give you all of that. I'm going to say though that at least the audience for this podcast, nobody is a young Earth creationist who says it out loud, and I would just say that you're not going to convince anyone listening to this that the world is about 6,000 years old, and I don't think
necessarily have to. If God, if it, like you said, most apologists and things like that will be of the more old Earth creationist. Does that mean that there can't be a God?
Well,
I don't think
would
so.
mean
I
that
think
the Bible is wrong, is what it would mean, because we both agree
Well,
that
not-
the Bible is
Yeah,
calling for young Earth.
we both agree that.
If
Yeah.
the Earth is old, then the Bible is wrong. Can we agree on that?
Well, it would be. I was wrong for. I could be wrong in holding that belief. Like there are intelligent people that hold the belief that it is old Earth, and they are willing to defend it.
I don't care about intelligent
argument.
people. They're either right or wrong. What we both agreed on.
But I'm either right or wrong.
Okay, but what we both agreed on is that the Bible is proposing a young Earth.
That's how I read it.
Right,
Exactly.
That's how I read it too. So if the way you read it is correct, and the Earth actually is billions of years old, then you would have to acknowledge that the Bible is wrong.
I still would say that.
So you can understand at least why I would have come to the understanding that the Bible is wrong.
And like I said, so if I wanted to point directly towards young Earth creationism, I would say that we did not have the Big Bang Theory 1,000 years ago. That would have been the beginning of the universe. Would have been a ridiculous theory. Has been a ridiculed theory throughout the years. We did not. We believed it was actually in 1910, 1920. The predominant theory is that the Earth was mainly methane and what was the other chemical? Well, that protein was easy to come across, and that we had a really good chance of producing protein. So life would have come about through this soup. We now believe that even if the soup that the Earth was formed at the beginning, and this is just through purely old Earth science, as I don't know how you would put it. It's through perspective of physicists and cosmologists and things like that. So even if the whole universe was made of that soup, the odds of us coming to life through the amount of proteins, it would take more time than we had.
Okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that's getting far afield, and it doesn't actually address the central point here being that the Bible promotes a young Earth creation, and if you think that the Earth is old, the Bible is wrong. I think because there are so many. I get your point. I don't want you to recapitulate why you think the Earth is young. It doesn't matter. Okay, that's not actually the point. So we talked. I gave 3 counterpoints. One of them was creation myth, not right. Bible's not right. 2, God's moral intuition. We've talked about that. Things that you think.
Wait. Where do you lay your morality in?
You want to talk about the moral argument? Okay, let me get through these, and we'll swing back around and talk about the moral argument a little bit. So God's moral intuition, wherever I get my moral founding from, I can show you from my perspective, God's moral intuition is off. So so in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. The answer to your question does not matter. God's moral intuition is offensive to my moral compass. Now, we can argue about which one of us, me or God, has the better moral compass, but the fact is we have different moral compasses. And in order to obey God, I would have to go against what I think is morally good. So once again, we've talked about that. We've mentioned some of those things and why I think that God's morality is non-existent. And so the Bible clearly promotes some of these things that are, I think, immoral, not just today, but always for all people at all times. The third thing that you mentioned, and I rebut it, was about the accuracy of Scripture. You mentioned how Luke was the most accurate of all historians. Obviously, I take exception to that. I would say that there are a few examples. I could probably give 4 or 5 off the top of my head, but I will limit myself. The ascension of Jesus in Luke, it happens in a day. In Acts, it happens in 40 days.
Luke wrote Acts.
I understand Luke wrote Acts, and
Okay.
this is the reason I use that particular example, because in 2 different writings that Luke writes at 2 different times, he has 2 different details that conflict with each other. That is not a sign of accuracy, and I understand some of the excuses about telescoping or time compression. That simply doesn't work. Luke makes it clear and takes pains to suggest that this happened in a very compressed amount of time. It happened very fast.
He lays out the stories that Luke knew. He lays out the fact that he
lays out the
people.
He lays out the stories that he knew, but he puts it all in a day. Let's be clear about that. Luke puts it in 24 hours.
He does not say. What it goes to is he goes from the meeting of the 12 in the room, or meeting of the apostles in the room, and then he took them towards Bethany. Now the ascension happened on the Mount of Olives, and
depends on what book you read.
You can go through a thing through cross-examine talking about 40 days specifically and how it all lines up. But I think Luke finished talking about it. Who knows? It could have he just gave a little bit of detail of where he went.
Once or twice, Luke uses phrases like "in that very hour."
Yes,
he's very clear about this, and so I will not put this in the show notes. But anyone who wants to read the account, just read the last chapter of Luke. It's Luke 24. You can read the whole chapter from start to finish, and you will see that all of these things happen in a day. In Acts, it happens in 40 days. That is not the only place where Luke gets some confusion. So you can spend all of your time trying to make that harmonize, but you will have lost the thread if you do. For instance, for instance, another place where Luke seems to get some details out of whack. Let me see. I got this pulled up. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. This is from an internet forum, and I was pulling together some stuff. I just pulled this quote, but I did go back and read through all of this stuff. These are things that I know. These are things that people know. So he says, Acts chapter 9, verse 19 through 28, shortly after his conversion, Paul went to Damascus, and a few days later was in the synagogue preaching Jesus. Then he went to Jerusalem, met with the apostles, and that is exactly how that story reads. Galatians 1, 10 through 20, Paul says he did not go to Jerusalem to confer with flesh and blood, but he went to Arabia for 3 years. Then he went to Damascus, and after this went to Jerusalem and saw only Peter and James. The point being that Luke's account of Paul's conversion is different in almost every detail than Paul's own account of his conversion. One of them is wrong. These are not harmonizable. They are different accounts with different details. So we can believe Luke's account or we can believe Paul's account. Now, I don't actually think much of Paul, but I tend to think that Paul's account probably is best read from Paul when other people give the details and they're different from Paul.
So Luke picks up the story when he goes to Jerusalem. Paul starts before then.
Where are you getting this from? I understand your desire to try to harmonize this, but that is not how the Bible reads. That is not what it says. And once again, people can read these texts for themselves. Acts 9, 19 through 28, and then read that side by side with Galatians 1, 10 through 20. This is not something that's new. This is not something I discovered yesterday. This is people have been talking about this stuff for a long time. Even the details that Luke writes about the conversion experience, he recounts it twice. And the first time he recounts it as a narrative happening, and the second time he recounts it as Paul telling the tale. And even those details are different. And that's the same writer. All I'm suggesting is that the details are played somewhat fast and loose here. Now, what Christians would say is that these types of details wouldn't have mattered in history at that time. And things like timelines wouldn't have mattered to historians at that time. So they could take events and put them in different arrangements. If a thing, let me just say this, because this comes from Christians, Christian scholars, in fact. So things that may have happened first, second, and third, the writer may have written third, first, and second for their own narrative. And a thing that may have taken 1 day or 10 days, the writer might have expanded to 40 days for a narrative purpose. 40, for instance, is a very important, portentous number. So you can't actually take details like that as seriously in ancient history, and they would have still been considered accurate historians. And my response to that is, I don't care whether they would have been considered good historians for their time. They wouldn't be considered good historians for our time.
Okay, but the reason why this man took Luke's gospel for being a good gospel, good historically accurate, is because he chose to base it off of the details of who was king and governor and leadership at that time, and then base the story out of that piece.
Right, and I don't see why any of that matters. If I write a fictional story about 9/11, guess what? I can get all the details right about 9/11, the names of the people on the planes, the names of the firefighters, the governor at the time, the president, their statements. I can get all kinds of details at this time, but I can still weave a story full of holes.
You can get all the details now. He couldn't get all the details, not with the resources, without being there. He needed to be there to get these details.
Okay, but I'm not sure that matters. So you can just say this is a historian who knew the details of a particular time and place. That doesn't mean that the narrative that he wove around those details is accurate.
I think you're trying to, like I said, I believe with he is accurate for his time, like the same as these scholars are saying, and I believe the reason why this particular guy, sorry, I'm trying to remember his name, William Ramsey, the reason why he was quoted as saying that he was a first-rank historian is based on him being better than the time.
Okay,
not him being better than today's
First
standard.
of all, I'm not impressed with William Ramsey, so I'm not impressed with his opinion. I don't really care what William Ramsey thought about Luke's accuracy, so that doesn't... this kind of argument from authority doesn't really work for me. So what I care about are the things that I mentioned. I mentioned to you in a couple of places, I think I may have even mentioned three things, where the details are wrong or contradictory, and how it's explained away by saying, well, the details don't really matter. So you can say, well, some of the details are right. You can look at the missionary journeys, and you can look at the waterways and the land masses and see where things were and how long it took to get to places. And all I would say is, so that was written by someone who knew the seas. Great. That doesn't mean that they're giving an accurate story about the more fantastical things that they're talking about. And I don't have any reason to believe that they're giving a terribly accurate story even about the mundane things, because, as I mentioned, he disagrees with Paul He disagrees with himself, and Christians just shrug it off and say the details don't matter. And what I'm telling you is, if the details don't matter, it ain't history. It certainly isn't a good one.
Well, like I said, I haven't studied this well enough to have the best answers for you.
You studied it well enough to quote William Ramsey.
I studied a bit of William Ramsey. So I've studied a person. Frank Turek, I think has quite a bit of work on it, and that's from his book is why I started studying William Ramsey.
I will be talking to an expert soon, I think, about the Book of Acts. But I would suggest that you stop studying experts on Acts and study Acts. Study Luke.
Well, I study Acts.
Okay,
study for what it...
So you study Luke. Study the book of Luke, the book of Acts. If you think he's a great historian, study that and study what people say about him. And just a thing that maybe you wouldn't want to do, but I'm going to suggest, study what skeptics say.
No, that's
about
what
Luke.
I try to do as well.
Okay, so you should... If you do that, you will recognize that there are many problems with the accuracy of Luke and Acts. And it's not wiped away by citing some authority of a man who thought that Luke was pretty cool.
Well, I will point out, William Ramsey went out with he wanted to disprove the gospel. That was why he left.
I don't care. That does not matter.
He was a skeptic. That's why I thought it was important to start studying him.
Okay, I don't know William Ramsey personally, though. I don't know what motivates him. All I can say is I can point to very specific things where the details are wrong, and I've done that on a couple of places here. And you can shrug them away and say the details don't matter. And just ignore the issue, but you at least have to understand why someone like me, who was a Christian, not a skeptic, who runs into these things and says, wait a minute, that's wrong. I didn't start out trying to disprove Acts, but I can't deny the evidence of my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Okay? Well, I would say that... I read the same accounts and come to a different conclusion.
You read the ending of Mark, right?
Yes.
And do you believe that the ending of Mark stops at verse 21 or verse 8?
I believe, that one's hard to know because,
no, it's not. It's in the Bible. You're a biblical literalist, right?
I can see that those that was added in later manuscripts. I don't know whether or not that was a copy that had been lost over the years, and that's the only reason why that one lasted longer.
Okay, but you're telling me that the Bible, I should trust its accuracy, and you can't even tell me if a significant chunk of the Bible is the Bible.
I think all Scripture is God-breathed and profitable for teaching.
So do you think that it is all Scripture all the way to verse 21?
I believe so.
Okay, then I don't know why you just went through that whole dodge there. So you do think that 9 through 21 is Scripture, and yet you do know what scholars say that it is in fact not, but in addition to. And I would say, just being generous to the argument, we don't know. And there's no way to settle it. There's no way to settle that issue. Mm-hmm. We can't interrogate history any further than we have on this matter. We will never know whether that was an original part of Mark or not.
I disagree.
Really? How do we know? How do we settle it?
I think we will know. I think.
Okay, but you agree that we don't know right now.
Well, I agree we don't know right now.
Okay, so I think
more discoveries are happening.
Then I think that any claims of the accuracy of the Bible are useless when you have chunks of the Bible that you don't know whether it's Bible or not.
Well, but they're all well, at least in most modern Bibles, they're subject to being brought out and put as as bracketed scripture or whatever the
Right,
case
and all
that they
means
mark.
all that means is they don't actually think it's scripture, but it's in there. And if they took it out, people wouldn't buy the Bible. That's a sales mechanism. That is not actually integrity, as far as I'm concerned. If they really think that it's not scripture, they shouldn't print it. If you think it's not scripture, you should magic marker it out of your Bible. The fact that you have it in there and you probably read it and use it in sermons means that you think it's scripture. So whatever you're saying now, if you use it in your sermons and if you do use it in Bible readings in church, you do think it's scripture. Either that or you're not being honest.
No, I do believe it is scripture. I do preface that when I do talk on these.
Well, why would you preface it?
Why would I preface it?
Yes.
Because like anything, I think we have to recognize that things are subject to criticism.
Well, no. It's either God's word or it isn't. Now, if you're saying we don't know it's God's word, if it's God's word, which you just said now, then you shouldn't read it as if it was. If you do think it is, then it shouldn't be bracketed. Woman caught in adultery in John, God's word or not?
I believe it is God's word.
Yeah, and same thing. Most scholars
I know.
don't.
I recognize that.
Right, and so once again, you're trying to sell me on the accuracy of a book where there are chunks of it where we don't even know if those things even belong. Let alone whether
regardless, but you're trying to state that because of the fact that these all that it has these things, but even Bart Ehrman recognizes the fact that the story of the Bible is not lost through anything that you're saying is inaccurate.
No, well, okay, Bart Ehrman. I've read Bart Ehrman extensively, and he does not believe that the Bible is a reliable guide for anything, and he doesn't believe that we have the words of the Bible, and he does believe that there are.
He doesn't believe we have the original Bible,
and he does. No, he doesn't. He believes that there are places where there is significant loss where we don't know what it says, and he gives some examples in his book, Misquoting Jesus.
Yeah, no,
So you're misrepresenting what Bart Ehrman thinks.
But he does give examples. But the same year he wrote Misquoting Jesus, he went on to say when working on it's actually studied in schools right now. He worked with one of his mentors on a piece. I can't remember the name right now.
I can't either, but I've read all three in the set. There was Misquoting Jesus, there was I can't remember, and then there was God's Problem. I can assure you, between all of those books, he never once recanted and stepped back and said, "No, we have the message of the Bible."
I'm not saying that he's saying that we have the original Bible. And when he debated James White on it, that was his biggest hang-up. It was the idea of the original Bible, but he was willing to say that the Bible that he would say is the most accurate and would differ less than from a modern translation than the ESV does. Well, actually, it was the Alexandrian text to the Byzantine text. They would differ more than his writing, that all the ones that he would take all the scripture.
You're cherry-picking Ehrman, and I'm not going to let you do that.
No, but that was in a debate with someone. So what he's willing to defend.
I'm familiar with Bart Ehrman's various debates. Trust me, very familiar with Bart Ehrman's various debates.
Yeah,
and I assure you that you are misrepresenting Ehrman. Ehrman holds very strongly to the idea that there are important places in the Bible where the message is lost.
Like I said, I agree that he does not believe that the original Bible is kept. I agree that he doesn't believe that. All I'm saying is he doesn't believe that the differences that he would say are of the original text would not differ more than the Byzantine and the Alexandrian text.
Okay, that's an irrelevant
Well, that's
an
like
irrelevant
saying
stat.
an ESV and a King James Bible would
It's
differ more
it's
than
like counting
his.
the number of words and saying, there aren't that many words different. But
No, but
that
doesn't
doesn't
White
speak.
went on to explain
That
it.
doesn't speak to the message. So, for instance, one of the examples he gives, and I don't need Bart Ehrman to give this example, by the way. I've known about it for some time because I started studying textual criticism when I was about 17. So one of the examples that he gives is actually one of my favorites because it's hilarious. It's where Jesus is.
You're talking about shows compassion is
Yes.
supposed to get angry. Yeah.
Right. He man asks, if you will, heal me of this, and Jesus gets angry, or Jesus gets very compassionate. Here's the deal. You have no idea which one that is. We can make a strong case either way. I think the strongest case is for anger, but it doesn't matter what I think. The fact of the matter is that's one word's difference. It's one word difference, but it's a huge difference.
But it's the one word difference. God, Jesus gets angry, has compassion, but either way, he still does do the work.
Yes, but the Bible is not just saying Jesus does the work. Otherwise, it would have said, so Jesus healed him. No, it gives an emotional state of Jesus.
Yes.
In some type of motivation. Now, if you don't understand that motivation, then there is something key here that you don't understand. Now, I just gave that example because you could say, well, it's not a lot of difference in words. This is one word, but it's exceptionally important. And that's how a lot of these problems are. They may not be.
The vast majority of the problems are
No.
comma here.
I don't care about
there.
what you call the vast majority of the problems. There are enough of the other kind of problem that it takes up a good portion of his book.
Yes.
So you can't tell me that there aren't major
with saying that he would not differ at any point than his mentor that is a theist, is a Christian.
Okay. So I encourage people to read Misquoting Jesus. You are misquoting Aaron.
It's in in his paperback preface.
Yeah, I've read them. I know them. I'm pretty familiar. So I think I think you have a little bit less familiarity with Ehrman than.
Well, that's probably true, but yeah. I like I said,
you make the mistake of a lot of Christian apologists, and you're young, and maybe I can talk you out of this particular mistake. Gary Habermas is one of the pioneers of this, what I consider a mistake. It's using skeptics, trying to use skeptics against themselves. And so they quote a lot of skeptics, and they talk about the minimal facts, and they talk about what skeptics accept this fact or that fact, or what skeptics say about this scripture or that scripture to bolster their case. First of all, you need to realize that you're talking about people who do not accept anything about your interpretation of God in the Bible. But second of all, the big mistake that's made is they tend to overstate the skeptic's position. And inevitably, I don't care how careful a researcher you are, you always end up misrepresenting the skeptic. And you're doing that now. You are going through a bit of Ehrman cherry picking, and I think that Ehrman is probably the most misquoted, most cherry picked of all skeptics by Christians. You simply aren't gonna get anywhere by quoting Ehrman on this. Not if you know Ehrman and understand his writings. And you have said enough to me that I just don't think you do.
Okay, well, like I said, I stated my case. I wouldn't. I don't want to make a straw man out of what Ehrman has said. I recognize that Ehrman is a skeptic and believes that we do not have the original Bible, and that was one of the pillars that wouldn't allow him to maintain his faith. I recognize all that.
Actually, that is not. So again, I think you are.
Well,
you're misunderstanding Aaron. That's not what
this,
made him an atheist. He became an atheist over the problem of evil and suffering. It was not over the problem of textual criticism. I think you should go back and read Ehrman.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the textual criticism stuff. That now I can tell you, for me, textual criticism was a problem. And these things were much more of a problem for me than I think an academic like Ehrman. He maintained as a Christian through much of his Renaissance when it came to understanding the Bible and textual criticism. What took him out of faith was the problem of suffering, and for that, I recommend you or anyone else in the audience to read Ehrman's book, God's Problem. And if you want to understand Ehrman and why he's not a Christian, that's the one that'll tell you. So I think we've gotten to the bottom of it. I think we've gone through our notes. I think that we've gone through some stuff that wasn't in our notes.
Well, what?
It's okay. I've got as much time as you've got. What do you want to get off your chest?
What I would say is I recognize that most of what we're talking about is you are a skeptic of my belief. I just don't understand why it is that you don't have any foundational statements. Like, what do you hold your morality up to? What do you like? I recognize that we've talked about morality and that you believe that it doesn't matter what your morality holds to, but like where you found your actual life on? Where do you found your actual belief system on?
I don't have a belief system, and I live one day at a time. As I said up front, I don't have a worldview in that sense. I don't need one. You can't make me have one. You can't make up one and paste it on me. So as much as it troubles you that I don't have a worldview, you're just gonna have to accept that. So, sorry.
Okay. Well,
I don't need this thing that you think you need in order to figure out what's right and wrong. I don't need some kind of organized statement of faith. I don't need a doctrine. I don't need a creed. I don't have one. But I can tell you what my sense of ethics is not based on. It's not based on a God that would, for instance, create a man and woman and put them in a garden with a devil to tempt them. I wouldn't listen to a God like that to save my life. It is not based on a God that would tell people in war to take the girls too young to have had sex and take them as war rape wives and kill all of the other kids, boys, women, and men. I wouldn't take moral advice from that God to save my life. I don't get my morals from a God that puts plagues on a country, and he targets one of the plagues specifically at children. I wouldn't listen to that God for anything. I wouldn't listen to a God that tells a guy to kill his kid to sacrifice for him as a test. That's how this God does. I wouldn't take my morals from that God for anything in the world. And so I don't always know what is ethically best in any given situation, but I can tell you absolutely, certainly 100% where I'm not looking to get that ethical advice.
Well, I would say the only where you get your sense of morality and what it says in Romans 2 is
I don't care what it says in Romans 2.
It is written on everyone's heart,
right,
whether or not they believe or disbelieve.
Sorry, you're quoting the Bible as if that mattered to me. I don't care what Romans 2 says.
And well, I think that's the only reason why you have a sense of what's right and what's wrong.
But you're taking that from a book that doesn't make any sense. If you want to talk about Romans, go back to Romans 1, where it talks about God being made clear to everyone, and that no one is without excuse. What it's basically saying is that there's no honest disbeliever.
I think everyone is presented with the is faced with God, and I think you earnestly believed in God at one point.
And I earnestly don't believe in him now. But what you're saying is that I can't possibly be honest. That God.
No. I think.
Oh, really?
I think you are. I think you honestly disbelieve, and
Really?
I think
Because Romans 1 says that I don't.
No, I think no one is without excuse. When you stand before God, you say, "I honestly didn't believe in you," that will no longer be excuse. You were in His presence. You talked to Him. You prayed to Him.
Yeah, I don't think I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked to myself and my community, but I never was.
Did
in
you
contact
earnestly
with the
believe
deity.
it then?
Sure, I did. I was earnestly wrong. I also believed in Santa when I was 6.
But there was a time. There was a time
when I believed in
Sorry.
Santa Claus. I'm not entirely sure what it matters what I believed when I was
But no,
young
I mean,
and
did you
stupid.
earnestly believe you had a conversation with God?
Honestly believed I had a conversation with Santa Claus. What's your point?
My point is that you yourself had stated in it was with Dale there. You were saying that you try to remember what you used to think and used to believe, and if you ask your parents, it's different. The story doesn't line up.
Correct.
And so all I'm saying is, or my point is that you earnestly believed and you did have conversation with God. Now through your how you look at it now is that it is you had a conversation to yourself, but you are misremembering.
Oh.
You did have a conversation.
Tell me
with God.
this: what about the people who have never believed?
What about the people that never experienced God?
They never believed in God.
I think everyone is presented with God.
So you're saying that they're lying. That's really what you're saying, and that's deplorable.
No.
That's ridiculous. This is why I don't care what Romans 2 says.
I'm not saying that they were. I'm not saying that they have been yet. I'm saying everyone will be presented with the gospel in their lifetime.
There are plenty of people who have died who have not been presented with God. They're dead and gone.
How do you know that?
Well, I don't know. Unless you're suggesting that God magically showed up at the point of their death and had some kind of pre-death conversation with them. I don't know what madness you were trying to portray, but people have lived and died atheists.
I have a friend of mine. He does street ministry in Ontario, and he was talking to a lady that was because people were leaving Canada going back to Saudi Arabia. And she had told him, he didn't ask her for this. She told him because he handed her a Gospel of John that she has been seeing Jesus beckon her for the last 3 nights. Now, or for over the last.
Okay, that's a nice testimony. I don't believe it. It doesn't matter.
But she she's a Muslim being presented with Jesus.
I don't care about this story. You understand, CJ, that a story like this is utterly ridiculous to me.
Okay,
and it is convincing to no one.
Well, I disagree.
It may be convincing to you, and that is a pity. But that is not the kind of story that makes someone say, "Oh, a Muslim saw God." Huh?
Well,
maybe I should reevaluate my life.
Stories of people being presented with Jesus, not through people, but through dreams and visions.
Okay, I haven't had any of those.
But my point would be that even the people that we decide did not ever get recognized or get
you have a fantasy that everybody's presented with the gospel somehow, some way, by either mundane means or miracles. I get it. I get that you think that. That's ridiculous.
Well,
that very idea is ridiculous, and it is convincing to no one. But I believe we got here by suggesting that I don't get my morals from an immoral God. And you started talking about Romans 2, and I told you I don't care about Romans 2. I explained to you where I don't get my ethics from and why I don't get my ethics from there. If I had a moral dilemma, I would sooner ask a homeless person on the street for advice than I would interrogate your Bible.
Okay.
Because the homeless person on the street has most likely not killed any innocent people. And the God of your Bible, you
misrepresent
killing.
what I believe. I don't believe there is all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I don't believe there is a single innocent in without sin. 1, 2. I believe.
Do you believe that everybody is deserving of hell?
Well, I don't believe that.
It's a pretty yes or no question. If everybody's a sinner, is everybody deserving of hell?
Everyone is a sinner. I believe
then
that
is
God
everybody
gives
deserving
time
of hell?
for people that
I'm not asking about what. I'm not asking about whether they can get a dispensation of grace. I'm asking if everyone deserves hell.
Yes.
Okay.
No matter how good you are, no matter how
that is an
great of a person you are.
absurd notion that everybody deserves hell.
Well, why?
It's evil. It's an evil notion. Do you think children deserve hell?
No, but if
do you believe children deserve?
No, I don't.
Okay,
and I don't
why?
think they get hell.
Well, why don't children deserve hell?
I believe that they have not reached an age of understanding.
What is the age of understanding?
I don't particularly know. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you're making up a doctrine then, because the Bible doesn't talk about the age of understanding.
Well, even Isaiah recognizes that even Jesus would have a time before he was sinless.
What?
Well, that it recognizes that he would have before he reached an age of understanding. Well, like he might have, grabbed something as a toddler or something like that. I don't know.
What? Okay. So that's new to me, but okay. I'll let that hang there. Since we're on the subject, no, don't worry. It's okay. The listeners can hear it and look it up if they want to. Tell me about hell. Maybe we can end on hell
Sure.
on a dark note. Tell me, is hell a state of mind or is it a place of blazing fire and torture for all eternity? Where are you going with hell?
I think it's a physical place. I think it is
Okay.
But I think it is a place outside
torment?
of God's.
Okay, is it torment or not?
I think it's torment made of our own.
Is it eternal or not?
I still am up and down on that.
Is it conscious?
Yes.
Okay, so it is conscious torment, and you're unsure about the eternal part.
Yeah, only because I don't know if it ends at the end of Messianic reign or not, when the destruction of Satan and everything, all the demons, or if it continues on.
Okay, is there fire?
It describes that. Yeah. Well.
Is there fire?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So fire is a part of the conscious torment that you get in hell, and is that a fair statement?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I think that is evil at the highest height of evil, and I don't need a moral argument or a worldview to say that's evil. And I think that any moral system that gives you that kind of idea that that's how people will end up is an evil system that you should abandon.
Would it be better than God you spend your entire life you spend your entire life trying to not be around the God that we're talking about, and that's currently how you are spending your life, is to try to not be around that God. And
so I'm not trying to not be around that God. I'm not around that God.
That. Yeah.
So,
and then he forces you into his presence. Is that loving?
No, I wouldn't want that at all.
Why would so then he puts you in a place where there is no?
Why would he put me in a place
at
at all?
Because he doesn't destroy you.
Why? I die, right? I'm gonna die. You're gonna die. We're all gonna die. He could just leave me dead. Why dig me up again and torment me?
I don't think he digs you up again.
Well, what does he do?
I think I go back and forth on whether or not we are eternal, but I do believe we have a spirit, and so I think that you just
okay. Do I die? Wait, let's go back. Do I die or not?
I think your body dies, obviously, but I don't think your soul does.
So you don't think I ever die? So I don't see why you're going back and forth on eternity then.
I think at the end of the Messianic reign, so that's the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. I think at the end of that. So after 1,000 years, that would be a fairly long time, regardless.
Okay, yeah, it would be. So, do you think that someone consciously burning in fire for 1,000 years is a fit punishment for anything that we can do on this earth?
I don't think. So you're saying we sin? I don't think we'd stop sinning just because we're in hell.
Oh, we would. Well, of course, if we're able to swear, I'd be doing a lot of that. so I don't. So you're saying that he would punish me for the swearing that I'm doing while I'm on fire? This God of yours is getting worse by the second.
So there is one description that we have of Jesus talking to a man from hell, the Lazarus.
Sure. So you think that's an actual story that happened?
I think it's God giving an allegorical story of what it would be like.
But so whether it happened or not, you think that sort of thing can happen?
I think it would be a description as to make you understand what it would be like.
Okay.
So I think it is torturous. I don't think it is. I think it is. To be honest, I think it's a torture of our own making. It is the sin of the people.
Do we light the fire? Wait a minute. What do you mean our own making? Do we light the fire?
I whether or not. Yeah, sure.
We light the fire? Honestly? How do you...
Well, the torture let's say it's an arsonist that lights the fire. Why
am I put in a cell with an arsonist? I'm not an arsonist. If I go to jail for a crime here on Earth, I'm not thrown in a cell with the worst of criminals. It depends on my crime. Why am I in a cell with an arsonist who lights fires and catches me on fire for 1,000 years?
I don't know.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Your worldview of hell doesn't make any sense.
Well, like I said, I think it is. We choose. Well,
no, we're not choosing. No one's.
You chose to not be in the presence of God.
I chose to not be in the presence of the monster that I understand as God. That doesn't mean that I chose to go to a place called hell that's lit on fire. Why would anyone choose that? I didn't choose that. If you think that that's my choice, you have greatly misapprehended me. Let me say for the record, for anyone who's confused about this, I choose not to go to a place where I'm lit on fire for 1,000 years. And I get punished for cursing.
I will say it does not describe Lazarus as being on fire. It describes him in torment and him wanting.
He says he's in torment from these flames. Yeah. I know what the story says. Okay, There are flames that are tormenting him.
Yeah.
Okay. And you say he's not on fire. He's in torment from these flames. I assume that he has some kind of body that can withstand the flames and be tormented and not die.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what the Bible says. Don't give me any made-up headcanon. The Bible talks about being in torment in flames. But now, you want to say it's 1,000 years. Okay.
The next things he says are, warn my brothers.
Yeah.
And then... give me this guy. So he'll make it. So he decides that even in that,
well, actually, he asked for a drop of water because he's on fire.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so
but then he asked for his servant to come down there with him. So he wanted.
No, No, he does not ask for someone to come down with him as in to keep him company. He asks for someone to go tell his brothers the truth of reality so that they would avoid this place. He was not trying to get people to come down there. I don't know where you're getting that from.
Well, if I'm wrong, I do apologize.
It's okay. I forgive you. You're not going to have to go to hell for that.
No, but like I said, I think it is a hell of our own design.
Okay, I know you say that, and Christians like to say that. C.S. Lewis said that, so other Christians say it because they think it sounds smart and it's really stupid. Tell me how hell is of anyone's own design. The Bible says of hell that it is a place that God created for the devil and his angels. That is what it says. It does not say it is a place of our design. It is a place of God's design, and he designed it for the devil and his angels. Where does this nonsense come from that hell is a place of our own design? That's not Bible.
It would be like even though Earth is of God's design, it would be a hell of my own design if I chose to go to an anarchical sub-state and was beaten by people. It would be the same.
Yeah, but I'm
kind
not
of
choosing
concept.
to do that.
Well,
and by the way, choosing to go there still doesn't mean that is a place of your design. So let's not conflate that. That's still a ridiculously absurd and somewhat offensive thing to say. You are telling people that you are saying is going to burn in fire, possibly for eternity, possibly for just 1,000 years, that they designed this for themselves. Don't ever say that to someone that you want to have a reasonable conversation with. That's ridiculous. It's immoral. You should never say that. Just because I don't want to spend eternity with someone that I think is a monster. By the way, if you saw God the way I did, you would think he was a monster too. You wouldn't want to spend eternity there either. That would not mean that you want to burn in hell.
No, I see what you're saying.
I'm glad you do, and I hope that if there's one thing that you change out of this conversation, it is that you never say that ridiculous thing to anybody again.
No, like I said, I still believe that it is of our
wrong. Don't do it.
Design.
It is not. So tell me how again. Walk me through how hell is my design.
I don't know if we can make the choice of leaving through Christ, of accepting after the fact.
Okay, but
so it would be at that point. If I don't know whether or not that's true.
Okay,
but if that was the case, then it would be a locked door from the inside.
Wait a minute. It's not locked from the inside. I assure you, if I find myself in a room that is burning, I'm going to open that door. If it's locked from the outside, not the inside. That once again, that is a thing that you pick up from C.S. Lewis, the fool C.S. Lewis, and you say it to normal people as if it made sense. I am telling you that is not a part of any moral reality. No one locks the door of hell from the inside and chooses to go there. Now, either you need to come up with a way of making that make sense, or you need to stop saying it, because I'm telling you as a person who is hearing it, that it is an immoral thing to say, and it is offensive, and you need to interact with that.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything right now to...
Okay, and until you do, stop saying that. You're not helping your case by saying that. There is no one that you will ever say that to who says, "Oh, I made hell and locked the door from the inside. I'd better join your church.
I don't try to force. I'm not a turn or burn kind of Christian.
Well,
I don't
you kind
try
of
to be.
are. If you think that people are throwing themselves into fiery rooms locked from the inside, you kind of are a turn or burn guy.
That's why I believe it is actually a necessity that we be willing to talk to people about it because of the horror that place is.
Okay, so you think that hell is such a horrible place, but you've already admitted there are several key things about it that you just don't know. You've made up a lot of things. You've got a lot of headcanon. You don't know. You're using it as a scare tactic. I'm telling you, it doesn't work on me because I think it is ridiculous and immoral.
Well, you brought up hell.
Well, I did. I wanted to know where you are. I can tell you. You
wanted to know what I believed about hell. But
my regular interlocutor is a Christian who does not believe the things about hell that you do. And in fact, most of the Christians that I interact with these days do not believe what you are professing about hell. What you're professing about hell is kind of an anachronistic view. It is not even the majority view. If you look at the polls, if you look at the Gallup polls, for instance, most Americans don't even believe in hell. Most Christians don't even believe in hell. They certainly don't believe in an eternal place of fire that non-believers will be in. That is not a popular view anymore.
That's okay. I'm okay with not having the popular view.
Right.
What my statement is that doesn't mean that I use it as I take difficulty to the idea that I use it as a scare tactic to try to say to people that they ought to believe.
Is it not supposed to be scary?
It is supposed to be scary.
Okay, then it's a scare tactic.
But I don't use it as a means to try to force my views upon people.
How can you say that?
I use it as the reasoning as to why it is important that I talk to people.
Okay, you can call it reasoning. I get that. But if any part of the message from God that you are presenting is either obey me or end up in this place, that is A, scare tactic, B, a threat, an ultimatum. That is what that is. Now, I don't care what other words you put around it. That's a turn or burn message. See, if it wasn't a turn or burn message, you could say turn or just live your life in peace, right? That's not your message. Or turn or die and you'll stay dead. That's not a turn or burn message. What you are saying is turn or literally burn in a place in your own creation locked from the inside. That is literally your message. Mm-hmm. So I don't see how you're saying you're not a turn or burn kind of guy. You are literally a turn or burn kind of guy.
The reason why I'm saying I'm not a turn or burn kind of guy is because I don't go onto the street and tell people turn or you're going to burn. I talk to them about
when do you introduce the hell?
If someone talks to me about hell, I'll talk to them about hell.
Well, okay, what if they never bring it up because they're not soaked in the Christian
the only other time that
idea?
I talk about hell is when it comes up in Scripture. Just like the only time my church has ever talked about tithing is when it comes up in Scripture. It always
comes up in Scripture. But let's just say you're evangelizing someone. Like maybe you're door knocking. You're in someone's home. You're talking to them. You're preaching the good news. They're kind of following along and nodding. But at the end of the day, they say, "Yeah, no, it's just not for me. Thank you. Have some cookies. Move along your way." Hell never comes. You never bring up the consequences of them not obeying the message.
I haven't been in a situation where I've had to or brought it up.
Okay, then I got to say that if you're in that situation and you leave and you actually think that their fate is that they're going to burn in hell and you don't bring it up, you're not a good evangelist.
Well, and that's why I think it is important to talk to people about Christianity. It's kind of like, well, in this case, it was the cure to a terrible fate. but cure to cancer, you would tell people, and that's why I
but
find it important
if you're only
to tell
telling people and you're giving them a carrot that they don't want, but there is a stick on the other side that they might want to avoid, you need to give them both, just as a matter of reason. For instance, the Christian heaven, I have no use for that. I have no use for the Christian heaven. And so if my choice is accept the Christian heaven or stay dead, I choose to stay dead.
But it would be like me saying, I don't think, well, I would say that I don't believe God wants people to
I'm just saying, if the choice
be around and obey him because they're afraid of punishment.
Well, but okay, but if the choice is Christian heaven or the Christian hell, I'll take the Christian heaven.
Okay.
So if you don't tell me about the Christian hell when I've rejected your Christian heaven, you're a bad evangelist.
Okay, well, I'll accept that as what you're like. Maybe I ought to talk more about that, but I would say people are more generally interested in the rest of what the Christian doctrine is.
Okay, I understand that, but you must understand, you must face that the vast majority of people you talk to about Christianity are going to reject you. And if you're not telling them the whole thing, if you're not telling them the truth of what you think the consequences are, you're doing them a disservice. So you're telling me you believe that they're going to burn in hell, but you're also telling me you're not a turn or burn preacher. And that to me is just contradictory. I don't understand how that can be. I can tell you, when I was evangelizing, I preached hell because I believed that people would burn in it. And you can say, well, you care, you think that it's important to give the message so they don't burn. You know what message is important to give them? There's a hell along the path where you're going. And if you keep going there, you're going to end up there. I can give you two messages. One, I can tell you how to avoid that, but more importantly, I can tell you a better way to live. This is evangelism, but it's not evangelism if you don't tell them all the news. You've given them false options. You've given them the belief that they can just reject what you're saying and go on about their happy lives, and you don't actually believe that. So yeah, I would, even though I think it's awful, I think it would make you a worse human being. If you're going to be true to what you say you are, you have to be a turn or burn evangelist because that's what you believe.
Well, I would just say that maybe I ought to reconsider my position as far as either. Well, like I said, that's what I read as far as Scripture goes. So maybe I ought to reconsider how I talk to people.
Yeah,
but
great. So the one thing that I may have made you reconsider is becoming a hellfire preacher.
No, I
now everybody's going to hate me.
Yeah, there you go. No, I don't think I'll go straight to hellfire, but either way, and regardless of situation, I'm going to end up leaving this and thinking over everything we talked about for the next probably few weeks. But
I will send you a link to the podcast so that you can listen to it. You can share it with your friends. You can do all that.
I will. I'll post it on anything that I can. And so, we put my last debate up on our website and stuff like that.
Let me just say, it's been a pleasure. I know that you have some questions that you would like to ask, especially about the moral argument. I said that we would get back to that. Maybe we can have you back on the show and just talk about the moral argument. That's an argument that deserves some time to itself, and I would be glad to give you that time. But let me tell you about a friend of mine. His name is Andrew Knight, and we sometimes do shows together. He has a podcast called Ask an Atheist Anything, 4A. Would you like to ask an atheist anything, CJ? Because I have already talked to him in advance, and I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to, he would probably love to have you on the show.
I think that would be awesome.
And here's the thing. He's nicer than me. He's so much nicer than me. He's a Southern gentleman.
I didn't find you to be too mean. I like I said, I grew up on a native reserve, and because of doing that, I talked like most natives talk. And when I got to high school, that became racist, apparently, just because of the way I talked. So I went through a lot.
So, and for the audience,
Blair,
they should know that CJ and I talked for a little while before we turned on the mic, and did a little bit of level setting so that he would understand what to expect. So this is not me beating up on CJ out of
yeah, but no, I can I don't think anything you were espousing was terribly mean or anything like that.
And it shouldn't be terribly new to you either. There may be some of my views that you haven't heard. You probably are used to hearing people defend, for instance, a worldview of some kind. And I'm one of the few people I know who would say, "Yeah, toss that worldview. I don't need it." So I'm not one who's going to get into a debate comparing one worldview to another. I think they're all flawed, and I think that there are other and better ways for us to live our day-to-day lives that don't involve made-up creeds. That said, there are some things that we talked about that really do push my buttons. When I hear Christians defend slavery, I'm going to get angry.
Right? Well, I mean, I would say again, I disagree. I think Christianity.
But I think that you can understand. I think you can understand. The anger,
no, I can understand.
Right?
Why.
It would be like if I were defending racism. You should get angry at that, right?
And that's why I have issues with certain translations and stuff like that, because it chooses to state that it has certain statements that I think could be misinterpreted as to being about specifically races, like a God's chosen race rather than people and things like that. And I think that's too close to an edge where people can try to do something like that. And I think every race is actually a gift of God, that it should be our different cultures and beliefs and stuff like that should be recognized for what they are and stuff like that. So I totally agree. I think it would be. I have a difficult time with racism.
Yeah, and so I appreciate where you're coming from, because, as I said, I came from there. So I know what that is like. There are not too many views that you hold that I haven't held, except for I would say on the hell view. My view is much more firm than yours. For one, I would have never waffled about whether it was a place of fire. It's a place of fire. I would have said it's eternal. There's no millennium. It's eternal. That's what I would have said, and I would have said it with a straight face and without shame. I find it shameful today, but yeah, I don't think of you as some kind of alien. You are you and me are made of the same stuff, and I hope that as you draw closer to my age, you come to a similar journey as me. So I wish you well in that journey, however it takes you. And I know that people change, views change. Just in closing, people know how I've changed over the years, but maybe you could, just to let the audience know that you are open to change, tell us, maybe one thing that you have changed your mind on in terms of religion, one thing that you used to think and that you decided that you were wrong on and changed.
Well, I remember being on a boat once, and I was talking to a friend of mine that was, third year religion class in university. Now I was like 14 years old. I'd been a Christian for a year, and I thought Christianity was actually the oldest religion in the world. Now, I clearly changed on that. Not only do I recognize that we're standing on the shoulders of Judaism, and even that wouldn't be considered the oldest religion, but outside of that, I also
that's a historical fact.
I also held a belief that was much more of the judgmental bent of when it was partly just a culture that I was in, which was if people had outward sin, therefore we shame them into acting more like us. And I don't think any Christian is like another Christian. I think that is pretty clear actually in the gospel, or in the epistles at the very least, that all of us are fairly different, and we shouldn't expect everyone to have one. There's one form Christian. Everyone comes out the same after manufacturing Christians to be the one after the other, same on the out. I held that belief that a Christian looked this way, acted this way, had this as a mission or idea, and I don't believe that anymore. I believe everyone has their own individual and has their own individual struggles, but also has their own individual strengths.
Well, that's fantastic. That means that you have progressed along your journey, and let me just drop this idea in your mind. It's possible for you to progress more. So the thoughts you have now about religion are different than the thoughts you had when you first started out. And you probably wouldn't have imagined when you first started out that you would be where you are right now. And if you keep an open mind, in another 20 years, you'll be someplace where you can't imagine you are now. You might think that you would never move any further left than where you are.
No, I recognize that I'm very much going to change. I recognize that. I definitely believe that when I look back, I will be like, I can't believe I held those thoughts and everything like that, and acted like that. I recognize that, but I just think my diving more into my relationship with God is what changed me to this rather than less. And so I think also the person I came here to plant this church with, I was also his oldest son's bully. Like that's kind of how much I've changed. And we're friends now, and I was in his wedding a couple of years back, but that's who I was. And I recognize that I've changed a lot, and I recognize that I'll change more, but I think that I'll change more because I of the gospel, not because I forsake it.
Well, I can assure you, no one who has forsaken the gospel ever foresaw that it was possible that they could. No one ever sat around thinking, I might forsake the gospel tomorrow. That's not how it works. And so as long as you continue to progress and continue to keep your mind open to new ideas, such as our conversation on hell, I think there's some things that you can go back and at least reshape some of your ideas there. Now, where might those ideas go? I don't know. But there's a good chance that tomorrow you'll be a different person than you are today on that subject alone. And so as you have these conversations with atheists, try to pick up some of what we're putting down, and we try to understand where you're coming from. But the difference is most of us, we have in fact been where you are. We know where you're coming from. And so we hope that communication can go both ways, because a lot of times when we're talking to Christians, a lot of times we feel like they're not actually listening.
Even David Smalley said I hold the opposite of dogma at the end of our debate, because I told him that I want to explain that there are I didn't you were bringing up Santa Claus earlier. I'm not doing that with my kid because I don't want my kid to decide that that I'm going to lie to him and teach him that there are things that don't exist. I'm
Good on you
I'm
for
not,
that, by the way.
I'm not going to not explain the other religions to my kid. I want him to understand them, one, so that he can understand what is out there, but also, two, so that he knows how to talk to people that hold these beliefs rather than ridicule people for holding beliefs different than his.
Cool. So
because I think that's what happens too often within all interreligion conversation is ridicule rather than an understanding that these people, rather than tolerance and an understanding from their position.
I look forward to the time when you sit your children down and tell them about how Satya Sai Baba raised 2 people from the dead in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that story, but
I'm sure you will if you're going to tell them about other religions. You'll tell them about the miracles that happened in other religions.
Yes, the miracles and core doctrines of other religions as well. I think
because they should know that resurrection is not exclusively to Christianity.
I think Sam Harris talks about that guy. Is that correct?
It's possible. Satya Sai Baba is kind of big, especially in India.
Yes.
So we're not in India, but he came across my radar, and when I was after I had left Christianity, but I found it interesting that there were other people in other religions who were miracle workers who did the kinds of miracles said of Jesus in our time that we could look at. So it wasn't. It became a kind of an eye-opening thing that, oh yeah, Jesus, not the only guy said to have raised dead people.
Mm-hmm.
And, here's one in our lifetime. We've got some videotape. We've got some interviews and things like that, stuff that we don't have for Christianity. So I found that interesting. And so if you're going to tell your children about other religions, absolutely study those other religions and their miracles, the more modern miracles especially, and give them a chance to hold those up against Christian miracles and see what they think. I think that you'll find that a great adventure. Come back on the show when you have that conversation. I'd love to know how it goes.
Well, sure. I hope to talk to you again before then.
I hope.
My oldest is only 5, so we don't even get to have long conversations.
I was baptized at 7, and I assure you, we would have had long conversations.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, I do talk we talked to him about obviously Christianity, and I talked to him about he loves dinosaurs, so we talk about exactly what's in the every dinosaur book. We talk about that. He doesn't really care. He likes dinosaurs, but he like I said, he's kind of crazy, like so much so that people older, there's an older lady in our church and was like, does he have ADD? I don't know yet.
Yeah,
but
they're supposed to be kind of crazy.
Yeah, but like I said, I when my kid can have a longer conversation, then we'll talk more about different faiths and even more about understanding Christianity.
And for the record, whether you say it or not, I'm just going to tell people you're not going to kill your kid. I don't care what voice you hear.
No,
you are not one seizure away from killing your kid. I just don't believe you would do it. And even if you want to think that you would do it because of doctrine, you wouldn't do it. And you don't want to ever leave a record.
That's very true.
Where your kid comes back and listens and says, "Yeah, I'd kill him." You don't ever want that.
also recognize Canada actually has different speech laws than America, and by that I mean we actually have speech laws. So there are actual full topics that I would have tried to avoid because
I did not know that.
literally you can be well, at least in Ontario you can be held in front of a federal tribunal.
Wow, I'm gonna see if I can get Dale put in front of a tribunal.
You're just trying to get him in trouble.
Now that I know.
There is a whole thing about that. That specifically is what made Jordan Peterson famous. That was what started his rise. It's his opposition to the bill that was passed in Ontario.
I see. Okay. Well, look, it's been fantastic. We've been going for about 3 hours.
Yeah. Sorry. Go to
audience is going to hate me. But I'm going to send you a link to all of this. And what I would like you to do is drop by the site when this is up. Drop by the forums, because we have pretty active commenters, and some of them might want to talk to you. And so if you are so inclined, jump in there and have a chat with some of the audience. Some of them are kind of rough, but they're a nice group. And there are a few Christians in there too who'll give you an attaboy. So I hope you come by for that. I will let Andrew know that you might want to have a chat with him. It's okay if I pass along your information to him.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. And once again, CJ Morgan, folks, go ahead and say your website again.
It is radiantchurch.ca. Let me just make sure that
radiantchurch.ca. Just being, was it Calvary Chapel?
Yeah.
Winnipeg.
Yeah, it'll immediately it comes up as the top link. My friend is a website designer, and so it's quite a nice website.
It is a very nice website. I will say, as church websites go, this is one of the good ones. So they did a great job. Great to have you, and we'll have you again sometime. And we look forward to hearing more from you. Have a great evening. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.